I nearly lost $900,000 during my divorce, but instead, I destroyed my cheating wife in court with shocking evidence. I work as an elementary school teacher, so my daily routine is very predictable. I have fixed hours at school, and every Tuesday, we usually had staff meetings that ended around 6 p.m. That meant I normally got home by 7. My wife, Terry, whom I had been married to for over 30 years, would go to the gym every Tuesday evening. She always came back exhausted, so I usually prepared dinner while she showered and handled the house chores. But one day, my principal surprised us by canceling the meeting. It was only 3:30 p.m., and I thought it would be a great idea to head home early, cook dinner, and maybe catch up on some household tasks. Lately, I'd noticed Terry becoming more distant, and I hoped a candlelit dinner might help rekindle some spark between us. Our marriage had been strained by financial troubles, and I could feel her pulling away more and more. She wanted to control everything, and if things didn't go her way, she would become stubborn and irritable. I always thought of myself as patient, but it was starting to wear me down. When I got home, I noticed her car in the garage. That was strange because she usually took the bus to the gym. I slipped in quietly through the back door. The first thing I saw was her purse sitting on the kitchen counter. Terry was always meticulous about where she placed her things, so this was odd. Then I noticed her workout clothes and a large towel on the floor. Just as confusion set in, I heard noises coming upstairs. My first thought was that she might not be feeling well, so I cautiously started up the stairs. That's when I stumbled over a pair of men's shoes. Scattered on the steps were pants, a shirt, socks, and worst of all, Terry's lingerie, the kind she only wore for anniversaries or special nights. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs, heart pounding, stomach turning. For a moment, I might faint. I sat down, trembling. Then anger began to boil inside me, an emotion I rarely allowed to take control. Years of teaching had given me patience, but this was beyond anything I could manage. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. To reach it, you had to pass through the walk-in closet. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And there it was, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the mother of our children, betraying me in our own bed. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I knew I would need proof, not just for myself, but for the storm that was about to follow. Watching it unfold before my eyes was like living through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Terry, the woman who claimed to love me, who volunteered at charities, who acted like the perfect wife, was now just another liar. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped recording, slipped out of the house, and just walked aimlessly. Eventually, I ended up in a park miles away. I sat on a bench, splashed some water on my face, and played the video back. The sound was low so nearby kids wouldn't hear, but on that screen was the collapse of my marriage, my family, my entire life. And there in the park, I broke down and cried. By the time I got back home, it was around 7 p.m., my usual return time on meeting days. Terry greeted me at the back door with fake concern. "Honey, are you okay? You look so pale. What happened? Do you want me to get you something to drink?" Her eyes were full of feigned worry, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. My voice shook as I muttered, "Not really. I think it's just my stomach. I'm going to take a shower and sleep it off." "All right, but take a bucket in case you throw up. I don't want to ruin the clean sheets," she said casually. That almost broke me. Those clean sheets had already been ruined, stained by betrayal. I replied more firmly, "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And that's exactly what I did. For the next few days, I pretended to be unwell. She went on with life as if nothing had happened, while I carried the weight of the recording in my pocket, the evidence that my marriage was nothing but ashes. When Monday came, I finally decided what to do next. I needed answers. Was this just a one-time betrayal, or had it been going on for a while? The next morning, I told the school principal that I had to undergo an unexpected medical procedure and wouldn't be able to teach for a few days. A substitute was arranged, which gave me the freedom I needed.
On Tuesday, I left home as usual, but parked several streets away, then walked back quietly, cutting through neighbors' yards. I knew all the back routes and moved carefully so no one would notice me. I slipped into our detached garage and changed into casual clothes and soft shoes to keep silent. Then came the waiting. I remembered that the last time I'd come home early, there hadn't been any strange cars parked outside. That meant her lover probably came on foot. I crouched behind the hedge and bushes near our front entrance, hidden but with a clear view of the door. Terry carried on her morning as if everything was normal, washing dishes, starting the dishwasher, vacuuming, dusting. Around 11:30, she went upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by the toilet flushing. After about 45 minutes, she came back down and left the front door slightly open, an unspoken invitation for her guest. It didn't take long. Around 1:30, he showed up. I didn't know who he was at first, but I managed to capture about 10 seconds of video on my phone. It showed his side profile and almost a clear shot of his face. He didn't hesitate. He just walked straight into my house. The first words I heard froze me in place. "I hope you're wearing that workout outfit again." "Of course," Terry replied with a giggle. "You always loved when I put it on. Sometimes I think that's what hooked you in the first place." That was all I needed. Their comfort with each other screamed of a long-term affair. They headed upstairs without a care in the world. I returned to the garage, my heart pounding out of my chest. My head was spinning with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why hadn't she ever talked to me about anything? What terrified me more was the thought of my health. They hadn't used protection, at least not that I could see. The idea that she might have put me at risk made my stomach churn. I thought back to her years at the gym, the social circle of married women she had joined, and the charity events. Maybe the gym held the answers.
Update 1. Being a teacher came with one big advantage. I had access to printers and other resources. I decided to start by printing still frames from the video I had taken. Identifying him was now my top priority. On Thursday, when Terry was supposed to go to the gym again, I suggested going with her. I claimed I was thinking about getting a membership myself, especially since school was on break. She immediately grew uncomfortable and tried to talk me out of it. "It's really just a group of wives who chat more than work out," she insisted. But I didn't budge. So that Thursday, I walked into the gym with her. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a scene from an old Western. Everyone turned to stare at me, whispering among themselves. Terry was visibly on edge, sneaking nervous glances toward the staff area. I tried to distract myself by walking around the facility. It was the usual setup, rows of machines, mirrors on the walls. Near the exit, I noticed a staff board with photos and contact info. At the top was the owner and director, Ms. Elizabeth West, followed by 2 women and 1 man. My blood went cold. The man was him, the lover. Under his photo, Philip Barnes, head of training programs, personal coach. As I memorized his number, I looked back toward the machines. Terry was gone. Panic struck me until I spotted her a few minutes later in a hushed but desperate conversation with none other than Philip. She stood partly hidden behind weight equipment, gesturing for him to leave. Then she quickly returned to her machine as if nothing had happened. She didn't realize I'd seen it all. I sat there, burning with rage, trying to keep my composure. When she came back over, she noticed my pale face and asked softly, "Are you okay? Is your blood sugar still low?" "I'm fine now. Are you ready to leave?" Before she could answer, the director's voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the last training session of the day is canceled. Mr. Barnes suddenly felt unwell and had to go home." A wave of disappointment swept through the women in the gym. But I wasn't disappointed. For me, it only confirmed everything. Update 2. It seemed that workouts with Mr. Bont were a cornerstone for many women at that gym. That alone made me think this needed deeper investigation. When I glanced at Terry, she didn't show much reaction to the announcement of his sudden illness, but I could swear I saw her shoulders relax, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "Let's go," she said quickly, snatching her towel and gym bag from the storage area where everyone left their things during class. We were just stepping out when a woman approached us, someone I didn't immediately recognize. "Such a shame we couldn't finish today's session properly," she commented to Terry. Terry gave a brief "agreed" and headed toward the car, clearly signaling that she had no interest in chatting further. "See you later," she tossed over her shoulder before sliding into the car faster than I'd ever seen her move. The ride home was silent. Terry leaned her head back, closed her eyes, and deliberately slowed her breathing as though calming herself. She looked serene, almost too serene, and I couldn't help but think maybe I could use this relaxed moment to probe deeper. "That was a pretty interesting workout, dear. The place is really well equipped. No wonder you've stayed so toned all these years." "Thanks, honey," she replied softly. "You're absolutely right. The program's great, and I enjoy being there. The women are friendly, too. Too bad Mr. Bont wasn't around today." She caught herself too quickly, correcting, Philip Bont. "He usually finishes every session with those tough exercises that really push us to the limit. It's always disappointing when he's not around." Inside, my stomach twisted. I knew all too well how far he had been pushing her body, but outwardly I only muttered, maybe he'll be better by next Thursday. The thought of their next intimate encounter made me sick, but I shoved it down. The following week, I had playground duty at school during pickup time. For those unfamiliar, it's chaos. Kids rushing out, chatting with friends, scanning for parents, while we teachers try to keep order until each child is collected. Near the end of pickup, a car pulled up, and I instantly recognized the driver. It was the same woman who had tried speaking to Terry in the gym. "Hello," she said nervously. "Sorry, I'm new to all this and lost track of the time. My son Timothy's here, right?" That wasn't unusual. New parents often struggled with pickup procedures. I reassured her I'd get Timothy, while colleagues covered the remaining kids. I found him near his classroom, chatting with another student. "Hey Tim, your mom's here. Let's head to the pickup area." He looked puzzled. He was in the last year of elementary school, old enough to not lose track of time. "That's weird," he muttered. "Mom's usually busy with her fitness instructor on Friday afternoons. Back at my old school, she often didn't come until 5:30. The word fitness instructor hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded as I casually asked, "Oh, that's great she takes care of her health. Do you happen to know his name?" "Yeah, it's Bont or something like that. He works at the local gym but also does private lessons at home. That's who I want to be when I grow up. Mom always seems so happy and relaxed after training with him. We usually order takeout on Fridays because she doesn't have time to cook." I nearly lost my composure. This man wasn't just entangled with my wife. He was messing around with multiple women in town. Back at the car, his mother thanked me warmly for helping. "Not a problem," I said smoothly. "Part of the job. By the way, I don't think we've officially met. I'm Gerard D. Kids just call me Mr. D." "Nice to meet you," she replied, shaking my hand. "I'm Mary Jones. I remember seeing you at the gym last Thursday. You were with your wife, Terry. Sorry she seemed in such a hurry to leave. It looked like Mr. Bont's absence threw everything off." The moment she said his name, her entire demeanor shifted. She paled, her hands trembled, and she stammered, well, Mr. D, see you later," before practically fleeing the parking lot. That sealed it. Bont wasn't just a trainer. He was a serial predator in our community.
Update 3. It was time to think about my future, and in that vision there was no Terry. Rage gave me clarity. I began reviewing all the small but crucial details of our shared life, the sort of things couples often overlook. Who pays which bills? Which insurance company do we use? When are utilities due? From which account do we make automatic payments? I discovered the mortgage had only a small balance left. My retirement account had grown to an impressive $900,000 thanks to mandatory contributions from our teachers' union. Our savings account, intended for an overseas vacation, held about $30,000. That trip was no longer on the table. My priority became draining it before Terry realized I knew about her betrayal. Quietly, I engineered a series of appliance breakdowns while she wasn't home. I'd unplug a cord, then claim a repairman had come to fix it, paying in cash. In reality, I pocketed the money and repaired it myself. Over time, I gathered nearly $20,000 this way. I also purchased tools and other necessities to prepare for what was coming. Update 4. I always paid cash for everything, showing the receipts to Terry, then secretly returning the items the next day. Dishonest? Absolutely. But honesty and trust had already been gutted from our marriage. Because of her actions, I was becoming a man I never thought I could be, a liar. Her Thursday daytime workouts with Bonte continued, and I no longer bothered even trying to initiate anything intimate with her. We coexisted like roommates. That was it. Quietly, I began boxing up my personal belongings, keeping them stored in the garage where Terry rarely went. Since her car usually sat outside, the garage was basically my territory, and she didn't notice my gradual disappearance. On the rare occasion she did ask about missing items, I told her they'd broken or that I didn't need them anymore. She accepted those answers, mostly because many of my things didn't fit her preferred aesthetic anyway. When most of my possessions were gone and the house looked practically unchanged, I realized how much I'd already surrendered to Terry's control over the years. I withdrew what I could from my retirement account and bought a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and a garage, but it was mine, close to the school where I worked, and best of all, the mortgage was small enough that half my salary easily covered the payments. No mansion, no luxury, but solid. Amazing what you can find if you're willing to skip the glossy neighborhoods. I moved my belongings in piece by piece. Furniture wasn't a problem. Secondhand shops and donation centers were full of cheap finds. Honestly, the place reflected my own state, used but still standing. It was time for everyone to get what they deserved. One afternoon at school pickup, Mary Jones came over to me again. Her son Timothy was playing nearby, but I immediately noticed she looked shaken, as if she had been crying. As a teacher, you get trained to read those signs. "Mr. D, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Of course. Just park over there and meet me at the benches." I always joked that those benches near the pickup zone were my office. She parked, then joined me while Timothy kicked a ball around. She hesitated, then finally began. "I don't know how much you know about what's been happening at the gym." I kept my face steady. "I know Terry, my wife, enjoys it there, says it keeps her in shape." She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with herself. Then she blurted out, "There are things you need to know." I cut to the chase. "Does this have to do with Philip Bonte?" Her expression hardened instantly. "You have no idea just how much it has to do with that pig." "I can imagine," I replied carefully, "but go on." Tears welled in her eyes. "It targets women at the gym, regulars. He watches, waits, and then pounces." I asked how she knew. She looked away, ashamed. "Because I was one of them, until last month. We met every Friday at 12:30. Her voice faltered as though reliving it. She confessed how she had believed there could be a future with him. Divorced, lonely, missing intimacy, Bonte had filled a void, until suddenly another woman replaced her. He dropped her cold with nothing but a half-hearted, "Sorry, can't anymore." She gave a bitter laugh through tears. "I thought I was special. Turns out I was just another notch." I sat stunned. How could she unload this on me, her child's teacher? She must have been truly desperate. Trying to offer some comfort, I murmured, "Relationships aren't always what they seem." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. Then she whispered, "You already know, don't you, about him and Terry?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, I know." Mary reached for my arm. "Then please believe me, he'll keep doing this until someone stops him. He doesn't care who he hurts, as long as his ego's fed. He even brags about it at bars with his buddies." Her tone sharpened. "If you need my help to make him pay, just say the word.
That man deserves to be brought down." She called for Timothy and drove off, leaving me in silence.
I sat there, mind racing. Oddly, I felt a flicker of relief. Her confession made my plan for revenge seem less like an act of a betrayed husband and more like a moral obligation. Bonte wasn't just wrecking my life, he was a predator preying on countless women. The question now was, how many more? I started piecing together his schedule. The gym was open every day except Mondays, and he seemed to be there constantly. Using the number listed at the gym, I tracked down his address, just 3 blocks from our house. No wonder it was so easy for him to sneak over for sessions with my wife. I told Terry that my doctor had recommended daily evening walks around 5 p.m. Luckily, she showed no interest in joining me. That gave me the perfect cover. Since I knew it wouldn't interfere with her own meetings, everything went smoothly. During my first evening walk, I headed straight to Bonte's address and discovered that he lived in a ground-floor apartment among several similar buildings. His car wasn't there, so I lingered nearby to catch his return. He usually left our house well before 6 p.m., which meant he almost always came back around that time. Sure enough, at exactly 6 p.m., he walked into his apartment. It became a routine, day after day, whenever I was free to go out. On days I had staff meetings and couldn't leave, I assumed he still followed the same pattern. I began to suspect that his evenings at the gym weren't really about exercise, but about meeting different women. To confirm this, I adjusted my schedule, starting my walks earlier and watching his daily movements more closely. Eventually, I decided to take a full week off from work just to investigate. I went to an electronics store and purchased surveillance equipment, a long-range listening device, motion-triggered HD cameras with audio, and an external hard drive for storage. On Monday, after setting everything up, I installed the first camera inside Bonte's apartment. Luckily, his place was small, almost like a studio with a kitchenette and dining space. One camera was enough to cover the entire living area, except the bedroom. Breaking in was shockingly easy. He hid his keys under the doormat. Careless. All I had to do was wait for him to head to the gym, slip inside, place the camera, and leave. From then on, every sound or movement in Bonte's apartment was recorded and streamed straight to my laptop, time-stamped and secure. That same evening, I got my first footage, Bonte eating takeout in front of the TV before heading to bed at 9 p.m. The next day, I slipped into the gym through the back entrance after closing time and set up a second camera in a private room where clients were usually assessed. This was the same room Bonte often used for one-on-one sessions. By Wednesday, when Terry went out shopping, I had already installed the third and fourth cameras, one in our bedroom and another in the living room. Reviewing Tuesday's recordings shocked me, though deep down I wasn't surprised. Bonte woke up, went out for breakfast, then came back and made a phone call. "Julie, hey, it's me. He's gone. See you at 12:30. Wear what I told you. Don't worry, I'll be careful. No one will see me come over. You said he's out for 3 days? Perfect. I'll come Thursday and Friday too. We'll talk later. Love you." He hung up with a spring in his step, practically glowing. On Thursday, I set up in the garage with my laptop, waiting. As expected, the camera caught him returning with breakfast again, then calling Terry. She answered, "Good thing my husband left for work. See you at 12:30 like always." That was the breaking point. Later, I asked Mary, Terry's mother, to help me compile a list of all the women Bonte had been involved with in the past. She attacked the task with energy, and within a week, I had names and addresses. To my horror, Terry's name was on that list too. At this point, our house meant nothing to me. It wasn't a home anymore, just a building. Terry noticed the emptiness, but I brushed it off, saying I was reorganizing my things. Meanwhile, I secretly prepared for the end. I met with a divorce attorney, set up new bank accounts and insurance under my name only, moved our vacation savings to my private account, and switched to a new SIM card. I even changed the beneficiaries of my retirement plan to our children. I gathered all the evidence, surveillance footage,
phone transcripts, photographs. I placed it all in folders along with the names and contact details of the women Bonte had been with. I even included the address of a local clinic for STD testing, since most of his affairs were unprotected. On our kitchen table, I left divorce papers, DVDs of their encounters, printed stills, and my wedding ring, cut in half and smeared with grime. Beside it was a note. "Terry, this ruined ring is what's left of our marriage. Do not contact me. If you must, do it through the attorney listed in the documents. I've requested a restraining order at the school, so do not come there. Any disturbance will result in immediate police intervention. Our children know the truth, so don't expect to rewrite the story." Then I left. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart for them. Word of the scandal spread quickly. The gym owner was forced to shut down and leave town. Bonte was later found beaten in an alley downtown. Divorce filings surged in our area, and several houses went up for sale. Terry came home that day, found my farewell package, and fainted on the spot. A neighbor called an ambulance. She later tried to contact me, but I ignored every attempt. Eventually, she even stormed the school, which ended in her arrest. After that, her efforts stopped. Our children didn't hold back. They confronted her openly, disgusted by her betrayal. Thankfully, they had inherited stronger values from me, not her. The divorce went through and financial matters were settled. Terry had to sell the house and move into a smaller place on the outskirts of town. By then, she was known around the community as the gym slut. Every time she went out, whispers and mocking glances followed. Shame and depression eventually pushed her into psychiatric care. As for me, I kept teaching, rebuilt my life, and now live peacefully in my new home.
They want us to follow a dress code at school? Nope, I'll wear whatever I want. A little background for context. I've never been a fan of dress codes just for the sake of having them. So when I got into a boarding school that didn't require uniforms, I was thrilled. Honestly, I don't even hate dress codes in principle. My problem is always with how people interpret them. For example, if the rules say socks should be black or blue, 99.9% of people will assume it means navy blue. I'm the kind of person who show up in sky blue socks just to prove a point. Not to make trouble, but simply to share a sly grin with the handful of people who think, well, it does just say blue. It's by way of reminding the bureaucrats who wrote the rules that they aren't as airtight as they think. As my husband likes to say, I've always been a bit of a pain in the neck. I enjoy showing that either or isn't the only option. I've always dressed boldly, loved unusual combinations of fabrics and colors, and if someone had encouraged me to learn sewing back then, I probably would have become a fashion designer. But boarding school is hardly a place full of vibrant creativity. Despite being spirited, I was never a troublemaker. My mom used to describe me as a polite, well-behaved kid who could bend rules into a pretzel without ever technically breaking them. She had to word her rules very carefully whenever she left me home alone, but she also had to be cautious not to give me new ideas in the process. If someone presented a rule as unbreakable, I just had to test it, and if they were pushy or smug about it, I'd find the cleverest way possible to prove them wrong. My mom always believed critical thinking was the real key to success in life. She taught me that if you can analyze a problem and figure out a solution, you don't need to have all the answers memorized, you just need to know how to find them. Remember, this was a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't fault modern parents for having a different mindset. Still, I'd raise my own kids with the same philosophy if I had them. She raised me to believe success comes to people who don't just answer apple when someone asks what that round red thing on the table is. Instead, you pick it up, study its weight and texture, notice the sheen on its wax, memorize its smell, because you never know when someone will ask you to describe the underside of an apple when there isn't one around. And when you grow up thinking that way, turning school dress codes inside out becomes kind of fun. So, here's the actual story. At my boarding school, we had 2 dress codes. The first was called the class dress code, and it basically meant we were expected to look like young professionals. Pretty standard stuff, skirts below fingertip length for girls, shirts and ties for boys, and all the usual details. The second set was for downtime, called city dress. That was for when we hung out in the student lounge or went off campus. It was more relaxed, but still had enough restrictions to prevent the girls from wearing anything too revealing or the boys from dressing like slobs in ripped clothes. Now, I had these suede knee-high fringe boots. Actually, I had two pairs, one black and one brown. They were the warmest, most comfortable boots I'd ever owned, even before Uggs became a thing. My mom and I had fought over those boots for years, so it was a huge personal victory when she let me bring them to school. One day, a teacher pulled me aside and told me the faculty had been discussing my boots and decided they didn't fit the class dress code. But I read the rules, I argued. There's nothing in there about boots like these. I know, she admitted, but we've decided they don't fit the image we want. But the color matches, I know. The material's fine too, suede is allowed. Yes, the rules don't mention height. Riding boots are permitted, right? That's true. So why then? I demanded. I honestly can't tell if I felt more angry or hurt. Probably both. This teacher was someone I respected, someone who had always been kind to me, and I immediately understood why they sent her to talk to me instead of someone else, because I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. I was the type to plan my revenge quietly. All right then, I said calmly, and walked away. That night, I studied the dress code rules word for word, line by line. I read through every single sentence of that dress code over and over again. I even said the rules out loud, picked up every piece of clothing listed, and examined it like I was some alien who only had this manual and a piece of fabric to figure out why humans wear these things. I had to admit it was a strict code, but they made two big mistakes. First, nowhere did it say where each piece of clothing had to be worn. Second, there was no mention that you even had to look presentable. The rules only specified colors and lengths, skirts below fingertip length, socks above the ankle, sleeves covering elbows, and so on. Shoes had to be in muted tones, black, brown, or other earthy shades like my fringe boots, but nowhere did it say you couldn't show up and say elf shoes. Of course, elf shoes wouldn't exactly scream professional, but still, loophole. I went to bed that night mad as hell, my head buzzing with mischievous ideas. I debated with myself for a long time whether I should even go through with it, but eventually I decided if I still felt the same way in the morning, I'd start phase 1. The next day, I woke up just as annoyed, and on my way to breakfast, I mentally made a list of the biggest clowns in my class. In the cafeteria, I found a couple of them and told them, you know, the handbook is very specific about how ties must be knotted, Windsor, single, or double, and if it's a bow tie, it has to be tied in the classic way, but nowhere does it say ties have to be worn on the neck. The rule just says they must be properly tied. I suggested they read it carefully that evening and decide for themselves what to do with that little loophole. The following day, ties were everywhere. On wrists, wrapped around glasses, tied across foreheads, looped around ankles, knees, thighs, even wrapped around fists like someone was stopping a nosebleed. If you could tie a Windsor knot on some body part, one of the boys in our school had done it. I was ridiculously proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were irritated, of course, though plenty of students found it hilarious, until math class. One boy came in without a visible tie. He was the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher looked down at him sternly and said, "I know you all decided to play games with ties today. I think we've been patient enough. But you do know the rules say you have to be wearing one." He grinned, looked her in the eye, and replied, "I am, you just can't see it." The room exploded with laughter. Maybe he really did tie it around his ankle under his pants, or around his elbow under the blazer. Who knows? But to the rest of us, he instantly became the guy who wore his tie on his junk. By the end of the day, I was considered the legend who had found the loophole, and he was the legend who took it to, well, the most infamous possible place. The very next morning, the school email newsletter had an announcement. The rules had been updated. Ties must now be worn only on the neck. Fun times were officially over. But phase 2, oh, that was the real challenge. I'd been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver with holographic rainbow circles all over, had a 5-centimeter platform, a chunky 10-centimeter heel, and lace-up fronts that came just above the ankle. Utterly outrageous. I knew there was no way I could get away with wearing them to class, but for city dress, I wanted them so bad. After 9 years of uniforms, I was finally starting to enjoy fashion.
I'd been saving money for months and would sneak into that store whenever I could just to look at them. For a while, I tried to convince myself they were too expensive, but once they banned my favorite suede fringe boots, my desire for those wild rainbow boots only grew stronger. Eventually, I scraped together enough money. It felt like fate. That weekend, I practically skipped to the mall, grinning from ear to ear, only to find they were sold out in my size. I nearly burst into tears. But then, right next to them, I saw the same design in black patent leather. Until that moment, I'd dismissed the black pair as boring, especially compared to the silver ones. But here's the thing. Our dress code had a whole paragraph about patent leather shoes. They were allowed, but only if worn with pants. Why? Because of that absurd old belief that shiny shoes could reflect a girl's underwear if she wore a skirt.
So my rainbow boots? Absolutely banned. But their black patent leather sisters with silver accents? Perfectly legal. Silver detailing was allowed since shoelace eyelets could be made of metal. And the 5-centimeter platform and 10-centimeter heel also fine. There wasn't even a height restriction for heels in the dress code. I guess the school assumed no high school girl would willingly spend an entire day in stilettos. And unlike the shiny rainbow boots, their black patent leather version looked less like party footwear and more like ankle boots a gummer would wear. Funny thing is, I never would have even glanced at those black boots if it weren't for my newly discovered obsession with the dress code. The outfit started with these bright orange polyester pants covered in tiny gray-green amorphous specks, something that vaguely resembled a microscopic giraffe print. The green was barely visible. From a distance, it just looked like some random texture over the orange. The clash between the two colors was so aggressive that the pattern literally seemed to vibrate, making you dizzy and even a little nauseous if you stared too long. By sheer luck, I'd also managed to grab an orange terry sweater in exactly the same shade. The result? From the waist up, I looked like a rejected Sesame Street character, while from the waist down, I resembled a disco-era misfit. Did I mention the pants were slightly flared? So on Monday, I walked into class looking like someone who'd been thrown off the set of Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had these heavy wooden heels that clumped so loudly they echoed through the entire building. Suddenly, I was towering a good 10 centimeters over everyone else, more noticeable in the hallways, and even rivaling some teachers in terms of sheer presence. I caught a few of them throwing sideways glances at my boots, and I started keeping mental notes on which staff members apparently had it out for my suede knee-highs. It was obvious who found my appearance ridiculous. But I didn't stop there. It turned into a personal mission to curate the most hideous outfits my imagination could come up with. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I just wanted to make sure each piece still technically complied with the dress code. Even the teachers admitted my boots met the written requirements. They just didn't like them. I'd put effort into following their rules, and suddenly it wasn't good enough, simply because my choices weren't to their taste. So fine. If they didn't like my boots, I'd wear ugly boots every single day, forcing them to stare at outfits that nobody in their right mind would find appealing. And what could they do? Tell me daily that my clothes were wrong while failing to explain how? By their own admission, nothing I wore actually broke the rules, and I wasn't about to start breaking them. That's not my style. Living in a dorm had its perks. Girls shared clothes freely. So as long as you were willing to lend your stuff too, you essentially had access to 30 wardrobes just in our block alone. My own clothes had been carefully coordinated, but once you started mixing them with other people's, the results became gloriously absurd. Like when my roommate's loud neon blouse, which she only ever wore with a black skirt, ended up paired with another girl's skirt in a clashing wild print. I wore it specifically because the colors screamed at each other. Still, not against the rules. Those scandalous slut boots, I only ever paired them with pants. I raided every thrift store, vintage shop, and second-hand place in town. And since our city had no shortage of hippies, the selection was fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so boyish that at a parent-teacher meeting, one of the teachers actually asked my mom if I was gay. Apparently, dressing badly meant you were automatically gay.
I'd braid my bangs into a thin plait, clip a heavy earring to the end so it dangled, and then swing it back and forth over my desk or book, only during the lessons of the teachers I suspected of discriminating against my boots. Basically, I did everything I could to annoy them with my appearance. At that infamous parent-teacher conference, they asked my mom to talk to me about my clothes. She blinked and asked if I was breaking any rules. They explained the boots situation. My mom laughed and told them there was nothing they could do. If there's one thing her daughter hated, it was being punished for a rule she didn't know existed, or worse, one that had never even been written down. If you want to make a new rule right now to stop her, go ahead. By tomorrow, she won't be doing this anymore. I promise you won't see those boots again. But the way she'll see it, you've taken away something she liked for no good reason. That's punishment, whether you call it that or not. And if she feels punished unfairly, she punishes back. Simple as that. My advice, drop it and spend the summer rewriting your handbook. Otherwise, you'll burn through paper trying to keep up with all the loopholes she's going to find. My daughter lives for finding loopholes. Honestly, I regret giving her so many puzzle books when she was little. Hearing this, the teachers admitted the only real reason they were ignoring my new boots was this. When the teachers saw how I reacted to the suede boots ban, some of them honestly seemed afraid to imagine what I might show up with next if they tried to outlaw the second pair as well. But being the well-behaved student that I actually was, I never wore those suede boots again. And after that, no one ever gave me grief about my outfits. Well, except for one time when my skirt ended up way too short. That one wasn't even intentional. The following year, I didn't return to that school, but for completely unrelated reasons. So I never found out if they rewrote any of their rules. To this day, I've kept those black boots. They're still tucked away somewhere, and every time I stumble across them at the bottom of a box, I can't help but smile. I even held on to a t-shirt from that era. It is, without exaggeration, the single ugliest piece of clothing I own, but I just can't throw it out. Every time I see it in my closet, I start laughing, remembering the whole saga. Somewhere, I've even got photos of me in that ridiculous fuzzy orange getup. If I ever dig them out, I'll definitely share them. Back then, I was having the time of my life breaking their so-called dress code, and it felt amazing. So here's the takeaway. Whatever problems you're facing, try flipping them inside out. Look at them from a different angle. Twist them around. Play with them. You never know where the cracks might be hiding. And of course, this is also just another wonderful story about how amazing my mom was. She always had my back. Though, if I'm honest, I suspect she was also quietly angry that the teachers hated our boots. Because if the school rules were clearly written, she could have been wearing them all along. Instead, those awesome boots just sat gathering dust in my locker. I miss you, Mom. Edit. No, I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. Life just went in a different direction. These days, I work for myself, building a business in a field I'm genuinely passionate about. I enjoy almost every minute of it. I'm happy and I'm grateful that I get to love what I do. One last note. This whole story took place in the mid-90s.
My parents are filming my life. My parents and I travel around the country in an RV. They post our lives online, and I hate them a little more for it every single day. When I was around 7, my parents decided to live in a camper and travel across the US. My dad works remotely, and my mom is a lifestyle blogger. She's not super famous, but popular enough that sometimes people recognize us in public. So, a camera has been pointed at me for as long as I can remember. For privacy reasons, I'm writing this from a throwaway account. I've already had more unwanted attention than most people see in a lifetime, and I'm exhausted from it. I sleep on a tiny bunk bed I outgrew years ago. The top bunk is the only place where I can keep my personal things. I don't even have a room, just a curtain. And honestly, thank God I'm an only child, or I'd have to share even that little bit of space. I was homeschooled most of my life, and when I hit high school, I insisted on switching to an online program. I'm 18 now, and I don't have a single real-life friend. We never stay anywhere longer than a month. I don't have a job either. It's impossible when you never live in one place. I could try online work, but that still wouldn't give me the independence to move out.
I've talked to my parents about our lifestyle more times than I can count, but they're so deep in denial they truly believe this nomad life is the best possible way to live. They act like I'm some pet they can drag along on their adventures. I hate traveling. I can't stand the heat, the bugs, or the endless hiking. I'm sick of sleeping in different parking lots every week. I can't wait for the day I can finally escape, away from their sunrise hikes and the ever-present camera shoved in my face. Yes, I've technically seen the whole country, but does that mean I'm not allowed to want a normal life, to go to college, to have friends? It feels like I'm asking for too much. Comments and my thoughts. People often tell me how lucky I am to live this way, but honestly, it's lonely beyond words. Someone once asked if I had any other relatives I could stay with. Sadly, I thought I didn't. My current plan is to find some kind of online work, save as much money as I can, and eventually rent a small apartment. I've also been talking to an online friend about possibly becoming roommates someday to share expenses. College might be my best shot at getting out, even though it's expensive. It would at least be a real step toward freedom and maybe a chance to finally have a life of my own. Still, I'm nervous. Being homeschooled left me far behind academically, and high school was already hard enough. Honestly, I'm just proud I managed to graduate from online school at all, instead of continuing full homeschooling. Someone joked that if I started making content about escaping my hipster parents, I'd probably go viral. And yes, the thought crossed my mind. Not for fame, but to raise awareness about what it's like to have your childhood turned into content. But I decided against it for a few reasons. First, it wouldn't be sustainable. People would lose interest after the story was told. Second, I'd need a stable, safe environment before putting myself out there publicly, and I don't have that yet. But most importantly, my life has already been on display without my consent. The only thing that's ever been truly mine is my privacy, and I don't want to give that up too. First update. Hi again. About a week ago, I posted about my awful experience living in an RV with my parents for nearly 10 years. It hasn't been long since then, but so much has changed. After the post blew up, I received hundreds of messages, people offering advice, sharing resources, and some even offering help in person, a few of which were questionable, to be honest. But most were kind, genuine people who just wanted to help, and I truly appreciate it. To be honest, it was overwhelming and I couldn't respond to everyone. But even if I didn't reply, I read everything. One question that kept coming up was, do you have any relatives you could stay with? I used to think the answer was no. My dad's side is non-existent, and my mom completely cut ties with her family years ago. She never talked about them. I didn't even know if they were alive. All I had was my mom's rare maiden name and her birthplace. Turns out that was enough to start with. It's ironic. I've always kind of hated the internet because I never had a choice in being online. My life was public without my consent. But for once, I'm genuinely grateful it exists. With some effort, I managed to find information about my mom's family, including my grandmother's old Facebook profile. It took a while to work up the courage, but eventually I messaged her. I told her about my mom, about myself, and about my situation. I won't share the details of why my mom cut contact with her family. That's not my story to tell. But my grandmother was shocked to learn she had a granddaughter she never knew existed. She was even more horrified to find out how I'd been raised. Through her, I discovered that I have an aunt and an uncle. My grandmother told them everything, and now I'm in touch with all three of them. They all want to help me get out, and since I'm legally an adult now, it's finally possible. I won't reveal too many details for safety reasons, but I've already arranged to move in with my aunt. She lives in a big city on the West Coast, a place full of opportunities for college and work. And yes, I'm planning to enroll in college soon, which feels surreal but exciting. My uncle has kids of his own, but my aunt lives alone and offered me her spare room for as long as I need it. She even bought my train ticket herself. I already have enough money to make it to the station. It still feels strange to say it out loud, but I'm talking to my family now. Real family. I'm still figuring out how or if I should tell my parents. My mom doesn't even know where her relatives live. so even if I said who I'm going to, she wouldn't know where that is. Some people suggested that if I decide to leave without telling them directly, I should leave a note or a short video explaining that I left willingly, just in case they make it sound like I was taken. That's probably what I'll do. Funny, isn't it? After all those years of being filmed, I might end up recording a video from myself, the only one that actually matters. As for my mom's content, I've been keeping quiet whenever the camera's on. Thankfully, neither of them has noticed anything unusual yet. Before I end this, I want to make one thing clear. Most of the people who reached out were kind and helpful, but if you tried to guess who I am, luckily commenters called them out and they deleted their posts. Some even messaged me privately trying to figure it out. I get the curiosity, I do, but I made this post anonymously for a reason. I've had enough attention to last a lifetime and I'm done with it. So please, even if you think you figured out who I am, don't share it. Let me keep what's left of my privacy. Long story short, I finally have a plan to leave and a safe place to go. If someone had told me 2 weeks ago that not only would I have a way out, but that I'd reconnect with family I didn't even know existed, I never would have believed them.
Final update. Hi everyone, I'm not planning to post another update for now, but I wanted to calm those who were worried about me. I'm doing fine. Truly, thank you all for your kindness and support. To answer some of the concerns people had, yes, I'm aware I don't really know my mom's side of the family yet, and I promise I'm being careful. I understand why my mom doesn't talk to them, and honestly, after seeing the documents and hearing their side, I believe them. They showed me actual court papers and messages that explained everything. My train isn't today or tomorrow, so before leaving, I'm still keeping in touch with them. They've been genuinely caring and trustworthy so far. My aunt, the one I'll be living with, is incredibly sweet. We already found a few shared interests, and she makes me feel welcome. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this before. I'm applying to college. For the first time, it feels possible. Hopefully, I'll be living in a dorm, so I won't stay with my aunt for long, just until things settle down. Some people told me not to record a goodbye video for my parents, and you're right, it would only be used for their content. I was angry and hurt when I thought about doing it, but I've realized it's not worth it. Maybe one day I'll talk to them face to face, but not now. Someone gave a really smart piece of advice to contact the local police non-emergency line once I move, just to let them know where I'll be staying and ask for a welfare check after a few weeks. That's actually a brilliant idea. Thank you for that suggestion. Second update. Hi again. It's been some time, and I wanted to share how things turned out. In my previous post, I said I'd gotten in touch with my relatives on my mom's side and might have a place to go. Well, I did it. I'm safe now, away from my parents, and we no longer speak. My aunt is an absolute angel, kind, understanding, and full of warmth. My grandmother and uncle are just as amazing. When I first arrived, my aunt and grandma took me on a mini shopping trip. Clothes, room decor, everything I could possibly need. And yes, I finally have my own room. My uncle introduced me to my cousins. He has a son and a daughter about my age. We've already become good friends. We hang out, laugh, and just live like normal teens. My aunt helps me research nearby colleges, but keeps reminding me not to rush things, that I can take my time, and that her home will always be open to me. She's someone I've grown to deeply admire. The more time we spend together, the more I realize how much we have in common. I'm endlessly grateful for the love and acceptance they've shown me. For the first time in my life, I'm discovering who I really am. I changed my hair color and cut, picked out a new nickname, and that's what I go by now. My cousin helps me with makeup and shares her favorite music. She calls herself a cringe-free pop fan, but honestly, she's awesome. I even made a private Instagram, only 5 followers, and I plan to keep it that way. For once, I feel like a normal teenager. I look in the mirror and genuinely like who I see. I didn't realize how uncomfortable I'd been in my own skin before, always trying to take care of everyone else, but never myself. Now, I'm finally free to breathe, to grow, to just be. I've started seeing a therapist, and she suggested writing this update as a way to close the past chapter of my life, to let go, and to move forward. This will be my last update. I want to live my life, enjoy my future, and keep my personal space. Many people asked me to share more about my childhood or everything that happened, but I'm not ready. This is my story, and I decide what to share. For the first time, I have control over who knows what about me, and I'm not giving that up. I'm truly happy now. I'm safe, I'm making plans, thinking about my future, and discovering who I am beyond the image my parents created. Thank you all for your kindness, advice, and compassion. Goodbye, and thank you for helping me get here.
The lawnmower theft. A guy from a lawn care service stole my lawnmower and disappeared. I occasionally hire local workers through a third-party app to mow my lawn. I've never had any issues, until recently, when I decided to mow it myself and realized the mower was gone. I usually keep it on the back porch. After checking my security footage, I was shocked to see the last guy I'd hired stealing my brand new mower, the one I'd only used twice, and trying to sneak it out through my neighbor's yard. The idiot must have thought my camera had a narrow angle. I reported it to the service, and they confirmed it was theft. They told me I needed to file a police report so they could help track the guy down and recover the mower. Update 1. The company gave me the thief's direct contact. His excuse? He claimed he thought the mower was broken and decided to help me out by removing it as junk, assuming that's why I hired them. Now he says someone stole his trailer with my mower inside it. I'm currently on the phone with the sheriff, filing a report. The sheriff said the amount qualifies as grand theft since it's over $500. He contacted the guy and gave him 24 hours to either return the mower or pay the full cost. Otherwise, it becomes a criminal case and a warrant will be issued for his arrest. Small-town sheriffs don't mess around. I also posted the theft video on the neighborhood app Nextdoor. Someone messaged me saying they knew his mom and sister and would reach out to them. A few others even found his Instagram. Update 2. Things are getting wild. Someone shared the Nextdoor video on Facebook, and now people who know the guy personally are clowning on him. Apparently, he'd been pretending online to be a successful entrepreneur and self-made influencer, and now everyone's tagging him under the stolen mower post. I honestly didn't want to ruin his life. I just wanted my mower back. But then his mother contacted me, begging me to remove the video because it was hurting his business and reputation. I couldn't help but laugh. I told her exactly what my next steps were and explained that fixing her son's mess wasn't her responsibility. I sent her the invoice so she could forward it to him. He still had 23 hours left. After that, arrest warrant. Then he deleted all his social media accounts. Every tag turned gray. It's 9:47 p.m. now. I'll call him at 7 a.m. to see what he plans to do. Honestly, I doubt this ends well. Update 3. Woke up to 36 missed calls between 1 and 4 a.m. Thank God for Do Not Disturb mode and spam blocking. When I tried calling back, the call went straight to voicemail. Then I tried from my Google Voice number and it went through. So yeah, he blocked my main number. I also spoke to his mom again. She's changed her tune now. Said she's tried reaching him too, but he's ignoring her calls. She finally told me, do what you have to do. He's really about to run from the law over a damned lawnmower. Update 4. Finally reached him through his sister. He said he doesn't have the $579 to replace the mower and asked if I could convince the sheriff to give him 2 weeks to get the money together, which is, by the way, an admission of guilt. I told him to borrow from someone or ask his family because I wasn't dropping the charges. He's got 9 hours left. Tick-tock. Update 5.
The sheriff sent a deputy over to inspect the property, take my statement, and collect documents from the app that hired him. Guess what? The deputy ran a background check, and it turns out the guy already has a criminal record in another county for theft. They're done waiting. The warrant's being issued. I don't feel bad for him at all. He dug his own hole, now he can sit in it. Then out of nowhere, I get a message from him using a new number. I took screenshots and forwarded them to the sheriff. Here's what he wrote. Hey man, it's Dushan. You posted that video of me taking your mower. I didn't mean any harm. I thought it didn't work and tried to help myself. Lots of my clients asked me to take old gear off their hands. Yours didn't even start when I tried it. I'm not paying for something you just left in your yard. This is your fault, not mine. And about that sheriff thing, I've got a great lawyer. God's on my side. You act like it's the end of the world, but I'll rise again. Good luck, bro. Yeah, the dude has completely lost it. I stopped responding altogether and forwarded the messages to his mother and sister. He seriously needs help. Then he sent another text. You think this is a joke, man? I don't care about you or the cops. It's all a game to me. People like you always try to bring down guys like me when we're rising up. You'll never understand my hustle. I live this every day. I could buy 10 lawnmowers if I wanted. Yours was trash anyway. Can't even afford a John Deere like a real man. You're a clown. Always will be. That's probably the last update, unless the sheriff tells me he's been arrested. If that happens, I'll post his mugshot. For now, I just bought a new mower, an electric one I can keep inside the house this time. Thanks to everyone for the support, jokes, and laughs. You honestly helped me stay sane through this mess. Final update. The sheriff called. The arrest warrant is active. If his plates get scanned or he's pulled over, he's done. Police don't have his current address, only his mom's. But I gotta say, the sheriff's office handled this incredibly fast. Not sure if I should tell his mother. Oh, and I treated myself today. Bought a new electric mower with a leaf blower, trimmer, and quick charger. It's quiet, clean, and stays in my garage. A corporate lawyer friend read the service's terms and told me I have a solid case. He's taking it pro bono. He even thinks the company will settle out of court to avoid bad publicity. And get this, someone said the thief is in Texas now. Looks like the guy really ran off over a lawnmower.
My boss demoted me, but still expected me to work just as hard as before. This happened a couple of years ago, but first I need to give a little background to set the scene. I grew up in a pretty poor family in the southern US. Despite that, I studied like crazy and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country, maybe even the world. I'm not trying to brag, it's just the truth. I realized early on that I absorb information fast, and it helps me work efficiently. And thanks to years spent collecting cans for money and working outside with my dad all day, I developed stubborn persistence and a strong work ethic. Being the oldest of 6 children, growing up in poverty also taught me to read people, their intentions, small cues, everything between the lines. In short, I was practically built for malicious compliance. After graduating from a great university, I moved back home to be close to my family and start my career. I also didn't care much for the Northeast, where my university was. It felt too gray and cold to me. I started with a crappy job just to get my foot in the door, then briefly worked at a startup. Eventually, I landed a position at a local government agency, earning almost double what I made before. The agency, well, specifically our county office, was notorious for insane turnover, awful coworkers, and an overall toxic and exhausting environment. Add to that the clients, who were often some of the most difficult people in the community, and the job drained every ounce of energy a person could have. But for a young guy, the salary felt good enough to deal with the pain. So when they offered me the job, I accepted, as cheerfully as someone can when walking straight into hell. I started in May. I worked my butt off from day one. I read the entire 350-page manual in my free time. I took on unpaid side tasks. I helped coworkers, even if it meant working more hours than I could handle. Sometimes I'd show up at 8 a.m. and wouldn't leave until 2 or 3 in the morning. I once had to cancel a long-planned date with my serious girlfriend because they called me in unexpectedly, and I stayed until late at night.
I consistently worked far more than I wanted, but they just kept piling on work because I was performing well. My supervisor would always say things like, "That's just how things are here. It's for the good of the agency. The best employees are the ones who sacrifice themselves for everyone else." Outside of work, she seemed like a perfectly pleasant woman, but a small part of me grew more irritated every time I heard those lines. By June, only 1 month in, I was already looking for escape routes, just like all the talented people who quit before me. I reached out to an MBA program that had always interested me, and they told me I should apply. Within a couple of days, the program director contacted me personally and scheduled an interview. The interview lasted 15 minutes. He thanked me for my time and ended the Skype call. Before the week was over, I received an email offering me a full ride scholarship plus a small but very useful monthly stipend as long as I agreed to work as a graduate assistant for 20 hours a week during semesters. I was thrilled and signed the acceptance document immediately. Just like that, in under a week, I went from drowning under a growing mountain of stress to becoming a future graduate student. The program began in January, which gave me about 5 months. I decided I'd stick it out at the agency, save as much money as possible, and then leave in December. Since I'm an honest person, I told my supervisor about my plans and explained that I'd be resigning at the end of December because I'd been given an incredible MBA opportunity. She congratulated me, said she was glad for my success, and told me she'd think about the next steps and get back to me soon. A couple of weeks passed, each day draining me a little more, like a river slowly eroding its banks. Finally, she called me into her office for a meeting. She told me I could stay with the agency, but only if I agreed to move into what she called a contract position. She said they needed me to vacate my current role so they could open it as an official vacancy and prepare it for a new hire.
She insisted that all of this was for the good of the agency, and that someone as principled, hardworking, and ethical as me would agree to such terms, and should agree to them. Remember those words, because they'll matter later. I asked what exactly would change, and she gave me a vague summary. That wasn't enough for me. She wasn't a terrible manager, but life taught me one rule: never sign anything unless you've personally read every line. So I requested a week to decide and asked for all documents detailing every change, benefits, duties, restrictions, everything. She promised to bring the paperwork the next day. And that's where the malicious compliance began. The following afternoon, she handed me 12 double-sided pages packed with text. Every page was filled with size 10 times New Roman, the kind of formatting that makes sentences blend into each other like wet ink. Even the most dedicated reader would fall asleep halfway through it. I read the packet that night, and with each page, my mood sank lower and lower. I was losing nearly every benefit except my accumulated overtime. My title was being reduced. Several privileges I had earned were simply gone. But halfway through, something changed. I suddenly sat up. I had found a tiny clause buried deep in legal sludge stating that under this new contract, I could not work more than 40 hours a week. I was forbidden from performing many of the tasks I had grown to despise. I was required to do only the duties explicitly listed in the new job description. In other words, once I hit 40 hours, I was done. No exceptions, no pitching in, no being a team player. As I reread that microscopic sentence, a slow smile crept across my face. At first it was small, the polite "I'm pretending to be interested" smile you give on a bad date. Then it grew wider and wider until I probably resembled the Grinch plotting to steal Christmas. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was so energized I barely slept. The next morning, I walked into the office prepared. My manager was delighted to hear I accepted the new contract. Of course, she had no idea how happy I actually was. After I handed her the signed pages, she began explaining what she wanted me to handle over the next 2 weeks. I quickly, but calmly, told her I wouldn't be able to do that. I explained that as a responsible and ethical employee, I must strictly follow my new contract. She stared at me, confusion mixing with anger, as I laid it all out. I could no longer perform several tasks I used to
because the contract prohibited them. I could not work overtime under any circumstances unless my hours were officially recorded. Once I reached 40 hours, I was required to stop working immediately and go home. After-hours calls, emails, and messages, not allowed. Everything would have to wait until Monday at 8 a.m. I was no longer permitted to take on call shifts. They'd need to find someone else fast, which would be, challenging. I couldn't help coworkers the way I used to because I no longer had the authority, the time, or the legal right to do so. Her stare could have melted steel, and the longer I continued, the more intense it became. When I left her office, which was now seconds away from metaphorically exploding, I sat down and began drafting an email. Here's the thing. In my own position, you needed certified training before you were legally allowed to sign off on cases and documents. If you hadn't completed that training and anyone found out, attorneys could tear the agency apart. Because of the county's incompetence, I never got that training, yet they still had me doing a job from day one. Every request I made about it had been ignored. So I wrote the email. I addressed it to my former supervisor, the office manager, and the regional director, the usual trio who had ignored me before. But this time, I added 2 more recipients in the blind copy, the big boss from the central office and her even bigger boss. Networking and politeness, I practice them religiously. They pay off when it counts. I asked very respectfully when I would finally receive the mandatory training I had been promised months ago. I explained that I had been handling cases without the required certification and would have to continue doing so until my responsibilities were reassigned. 2 minutes later, I received a reply from the highest-ranking official in the entire state agency.
She expressed that she was saddened and disturbed to hear about my situation and promised she would personally ensure I completed the required training. She was also shocked that I had essentially been forced to accept a demotion just to keep my job. As a result, she guaranteed that under no circumstances would my salary be reduced. The most amusing part? I was being trained for a position I no longer held, so the whole exercise was absurd in itself. On top of that, the standard training sessions weren't even being offered at that time. This meant I had to travel to the state capitol for a special session, just me and a handful of other lucky employees from across the state. Since the capital was far from home, company policy required that they provide a hotel room and a reasonable per diem. Thanks to some late-night research, I discovered that the city was hosting major events at the same time. I reported this to the big boss from the central office, explaining that no reasonably priced rooms were available near the training site. That would have been a contract violation on their part. Now it was their responsibility to find accommodation for me. In the end, the big boss exercised her authority and booked me a luxury suite in a stunning hotel, a pinnacle of cosmopolitan glamour, at least by local standards. The following week, I went to the week-long training. Let me remind you, this was for a job I no longer held and had no intention of ever doing again. My motivation, naturally, was minimal. The entire week, I did nothing but enjoy the luxury suite, expensive meals, and a couple of fun events in the city. In effect, I received a fully paid week off, even though I technically no longer had benefits. Returning to the office, I noticed that 2 coworkers from my department had quit, along with several others across the office. Chaos reigned largely because my letter from 2 weeks earlier had finally reached the central big boss. She had dug in, realized how badly our office was running, and acted swiftly and ruthlessly. She dropped the full weight of bureaucratic authority, and the office felt it. Thanks to my new contract status, I was required to do only what was explicitly stated in it. Due to office incompetence, I could complete all my assigned tasks in about 20 hours a week. Plus, with the chaos caused by coworkers being sent to training, I was often tasked with simply transporting items from one location to another, sometimes across the state. I was slightly annoyed that this distracted me from core duties, but of course I was willing to sacrifice myself for the agency. It allowed me to easily rack up hours, sometimes working 16-hour days doing almost nothing and getting paid for the mileage. I would sit at my desk, headphones on, quietly watching the world burn around me. My office life until my departure was simple: handle minor tasks, then do absolutely nothing, browse the internet, watch YouTube, etc., until I reached 40 hours for the week. Often I could leave for the weekend by Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. My life had shifted from a nightmare to a balanced existence. I began enjoying life again, spending time with my girlfriend, playing video games, and pursuing hobbies. I even used accumulated overtime to pay for a Caribbean cruise in November, which I was thrilled about because many childhood friends were going. My once formidable, now comparatively humble boss quietly wished me a good vacation and expressed hope I'd return. I joked that I couldn't promise anything. I enjoyed a week in warm waters and on the islands, experienced the pleasure of cruising like a pro, and reflected on what I wanted from life, work, and myself. Back at the office on Monday, I waited for my boss. When she entered, she already knew what I would say. I could see the joy drain from her face, leaving only a hollow shell. I informed her that, unfortunately, I couldn't stay until the end of December. I needed to leave 2 weeks early due to unforeseen complications in my transition to the MBA program. She replied with a weary, strained tone, "I understand. Thank you for your 6 months of service. I'm sorry to see you go." And that's how I turned a demotion into a fully paid week off and nearly 4 months of easy work. Moreover, I turned her words against her, becoming the model ethical employee, strictly following my contract while creating office chaos for weeks as management scrambled to handle the attention from the central leadership. Recently, I discussed this story with my current girlfriend, whom I met at that very agency. She's amazing and makes me happier than I've ever been. I'm fairly certain I'll propose eventually. She mentioned that both my previous bosses, as well as the office manager and regional director, were eventually removed from their positions, enforced by the central big boss, shortly after my departure. For those curious, I completed my MBA program with a perfect GPA, 4.0. Next week, I have an interview for a new position. Looks like I'll nearly double my income again.
Hi everyone. I turned 18 just a few days ago, and for my birthday, my dad surprised me with something incredible. My very first international trip to India, just the two of us. This trip was supposed to be something really special for so many reasons. My mom passed away when I was only 6. To cope with the loss, my dad and I used to watch Indian movies together all the time. They were colorful, uplifting, and helped brighten even the darkest days. That's how I fell in love with Indian culture. My mom loved those films too. She even had a collection of traditional Indian outfits, even though she never actually got to visit India herself. Before she died, she and my dad promised we'd go there as a family one day. Sadly, she passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm in her sleep before we could make that dream come true. She was only 32. After her death, it was just me and Dad. Watching movies together became our little ritual to keep her memory alive and stay close. Over the years, it made our bond stronger than ever. I know Mom would be proud of us today. That's why India has always held such a deep emotional meaning for both of us. It's not just a trip, it's a promise finally coming true. When Dad revealed at my birthday party that he'd booked the trip, I was ecstatic. I couldn't stop smiling. But not everyone was happy for me. My stepmom, Susan, and her daughter, Nadia, 17, looked like someone had slapped them. And sure enough, after the guests left, I overheard them arguing with my dad. From what I caught, Susan thought he should have postponed the trip so we could all go as a family. Honestly, I was relieved that it would just be the two of us. I don't get along with Susan or Nadia at all, and past family vacations with them were a nightmare. I couldn't imagine them ruining this one too, especially since it meant so much to me emotionally. Luckily, they had their own reasons not to join anyway. Nadia had her final exams and upcoming graduation, and Susan was tied up with an important project at work. Still, I can't help but feel Dad timed things perfectly so it could be just us, even if he'll never admit it. Susan and Nadia came into my life about 5 years ago. At first, everything seemed fine. They acted friendly enough while Dad was just dating Susan. But once he married her 2 years ago, things shifted.
Their attitude toward me became cold and strange for no reason I could figure out. I hadn't done anything differently, yet suddenly I was treated like an outsider in my own home. And now, well, let's just say their jealousy hit a whole new level. Things were already bad with my stepmom and stepsister, but what they did before my trip crossed every line. I was never close with Susan or Nadia, but at least in the beginning our relationship was civil and polite. That all changed after Dad married Susan. Suddenly, she started treating me like dirt, and Nadia copied every move her mother made. They'd talk down to me, make nasty little remarks, and act cruel, but only when Dad wasn't around. The moment he walked into the room, they'd flip the switch and turn into sweet, smiling angels. It was so fake it made my skin crawl. Eventually, I needed to tell Dad what was going on. We sat down for a family talk, and at first, Susan and Nadia denied everything. Luckily, I had recorded one of our earlier conversations where they were openly horrible to me. With evidence on the table, they couldn't lie anymore. So instead of denying, they switched to emotional manipulation. They both burst into tears and told Dad they only acted that way because they felt like I hadn't accepted them as family, which was total nonsense. I did see them as family. It was them who treated me like garbage. Yet somehow they expected me to keep being nice to them while they showed me zero respect. Dad was confused and torn. Susan was the first woman he'd really cared for since Mom, and I knew he didn't want to lose that relationship so easily. He asked all of us to try harder to get along. For his sake, I agreed to keep things civil. After that, their behavior shifted again. Instead of being nice in front of Dad and cruel behind his back, they just chose to completely ignore me whenever he wasn't around. It was like I didn't exist. Honestly, I preferred it that way. At least they weren't actively tormenting me. For Dad's sake, we kept up the performance of being one happy family, and that carried on for about a year. Fast forward to just a few days ago. The morning after my birthday, Dad and I had breakfast together, and I pulled him aside. I asked him straight out if Susan and Nadia were upset about not joining us on the India trip. He admitted they were, but also reminded me how much this trip meant to us, especially with it falling so close to Mom's death anniversary. He wanted this to be our special time together, just father and daughter. He promised he'd smooth things over with them later. That was fine by me. Honestly, vacations with Susan and Nadia were torture. Dad and I are explorers. We love walking around, sightseeing, soaking up every bit of culture. They, on the other hand, prefer to sit in the hotel and complain if we're even a little late for dinner. To me, that's not a vacation. That's being trapped. India was supposed to be different. India was supposed to be ours. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, especially since Susan and Nadia had taken their own little trips together in the past. The only real difference was that ours was longer and farther away, 10 days overseas instead of just a weekend somewhere nearby. But still, it felt completely fair. Dad told me not to stress, to focus on packing and getting ready. He promised he'd deal with Susan and Nadia after we got back. So I did exactly that. For the past 2 days, I was walking on air, too excited to care about their drama. Yesterday, I finished packing everything, double-checked my documents, and tucked my passport into my bag so it would be ready. Our flight was scheduled for today. But now, I don't even know if we're going anymore, because Susan and Nadia crossed a line so insane, I still can't believe it. They burned my passport. Yes, burned it. Not lost, not misplaced, they literally destroyed it. I found out just a few hours ago. It was around 6 p.m. yesterday when I was organizing paperwork and noticed it was missing from my bag. By 2 a.m., the truth came out. They had actually set it on fire.
They burned my passport before my trip. My dad's revenge was brutal. When I went through my bag to double-check everything before our flight, I realized my passport wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced it, so I tore the entire house apart. Drawers, shelves, even the laundry baskets. 45 minutes later, I was sweating, panicking, and close to tears. It was just gone. That's when Susan and Nadia waltzed into my room with these fake sweet voices and asked, "Lose something?" I immediately felt something was off, but in desperation, I admitted I couldn't find my passport anywhere. That's when Susan tossed something on my bed. It was my passport, or at least what was left of it. Half burned, charred along the edges, completely ruined. She smirked and asked, "Was this what you were looking for?" I froze. My brain couldn't even process it at first. When the shock finally wore off, I decided I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me break down. I calmly set the ruined passport aside, stood up, shut the door in their faces, locked it, and then I collapsed into tears. Dad wasn't home. He was out picking up clothes for the trip. I texted him everything that happened, even attached a photo of the burned passport. Within 20 minutes, I heard him storming into the house. His voice shook the walls as he screamed at Susan and Nadia, calling them psychos and ordering them out. He said he'd already made one mistake when he ignored the first time they mistreated me, and he wasn't about to repeat it just because he once loved Susan. Of course, they immediately tried to fake cry and blame me. Their story? That I'd supposedly left a lit cigarette on my dresser, and that's how my passport caught fire. Which is insane. I don't even smoke. At that point, I came downstairs because I couldn't let them spin lies like that. Dad looked at me and said I was just in time because he had something planned. I assumed he was about to call the police, but no. He went into his office and came back with a stack of papers. Nadia's face went pale the second she saw them. Then, without saying a word, Dad ripped the documents in half right in front of Susan. Turns out those papers were for Nadia's student loan. She needed Dad to co-sign so she could pay for college since Susan hadn't saved a dime for her. Dad had been ready to help, not anymore. That was his revenge. My passport for her college dream. Fair trade, honestly. Within an hour, Susan and Nadia were gone. They begged, pleaded, even got on their knees, but Dad didn't budge. Now, since the moment they left, they've been spamming me with texts, Nadia especially. She keeps begging me to convince Dad to reconsider, promising she'll do anything to make up for it. She claims they never knew Dad was going to co-sign her loan, and that they just lashed out because they felt excluded. I finally replied once. I reminded them that they've gone on plenty of mother-daughter trips without us, so why is it unfair when Dad and I wanted one international trip with Dad, without my stepmother and stepsister? Their getaways usually last only 2 to 3 days, somewhere nearby, while ours was supposed to be 10 full days in India. That's a big difference. So here I am asking, am I really the bad guy for wanting one international trip with my dad without my stepmother and stepsister? Well, before I continue, I'll just say what I think the answer is. No, not at all. This situation seems clear. I wasn't wrong. I wanted time with my dad, especially on my 18th birthday, and especially since it was in honor of my late mom. What Susan and Nadia did was cruel and manipulative, and it says more about them than about me. My dad, he's the one I feel bad for. He fell for a woman who clearly didn't respect me, and by extension, didn't really love him the way she should have.
Update 2. A lot of people asked why we didn't call the cops after they destroyed my passport. The truth? It didn't even cross my mind at first. I was in shock, panicking, crying, and honestly, what would it have done? They would have just claimed it was an accident, dragged it out forever, and nothing would change. We didn't want that mess. Others also asked why I wasn't in college yet. I graduated high school last year and decided to take a gap year to figure myself out. I worked a few jobs, interned in journalism, and gained some experience in the field I want to study. Now I'm applying to schools, and luckily my grandparents have already promised to cover my tuition, so my dad doesn't have to stress about me. Nadia's situation was completely different, which is why Dad was planning to co-sign her student loan. But after what happened, well, you already know how that ended. As for our trip, today was supposed to be our flight to India. Instead, we stayed home and watched old movies we used to love. It wasn't the same, but honestly, it helped. I finally blocked both Susan and Nadia, and I don't regret it. They don't deserve my sympathy. You were all right. I was only second-guessing myself because I'd been missing my mom and was in a very emotional state. But they betrayed me for no reason, and whatever happens to them now, they absolutely brought on themselves. Update 3. It's been 4 days since my last post, and today Dad came home from work with big news. He filed for divorce. Afterward, we finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for far too long. He admitted that he'd been selfish. He loved Susan and tried to convince himself it would work out, even when her behavior, and Nadia's, clearly proved otherwise. Instead of trying to repair things with me, they simply shut me out completely. That's not family. That's not love. Dad told me he finally realized he'd been clinging to something toxic and that it was damaging both of us. He deserves better. I deserve better. Maybe he did love her, but it was obvious she didn't love him enough to even tolerate me, and that's not the kind of woman he should spend his life with. Update 3. The reason Susan never truly accepted me was simple. She could never see me as part of her family. Deep down, she probably knew that for Dad, I would always come first, and that neither she nor Nadia could ever replace me. That jealousy and insecurity made her bitter, and eventually it poisoned everything. Dad may never fully understand why their behavior shifted so dramatically, because before the wedding they treated me kindly, but the moment the vows were said, it's like they became different people overnight. Dad admitted he ignored the signs, hoping things would somehow settle, but the damage was already done. He told me he's finished pretending. We're not a happy family, and there's no point acting like one. That same day, after meeting with his lawyer, he filed for divorce. Later, he apologized for everything I'd had to endure because of his choices, and we just hugged. Some might call him a flawed father, but to me, he's the best dad I could ever ask for. Sure, he made mistakes and sometimes thought only of himself, but every mistake was outweighed by 10 good things he did for me. I love him, and I always will. Update 4. A few days later, it became official. Susan was served divorce papers. Dad came home early from work and locked himself in his office. I could hear him shouting into the phone, and it had me worried. Hours later, he finally explained. Susan had called, threatening to ruin him if he went through with the divorce. She promised to spread lies, throw accusations, and destroy his reputation. The first time she caught him off guard at work, but once he was home, he recorded the call. When she realized he had proof, she flipped out, accused him of blackmail, and turned the whole thing into chaos. Dad didn't back down. He told her if she tried to drag his name through the mud, he'd make sure she would regret it. From her voice, he could tell she was shaken. He said the process will start soon, and once it's finalized, he and I will finally take that trip to India together. He promised me. For now, we just hope she doesn't create more problems. But honestly, with the evidence I have, including the destroyed passport, she knows she's fighting a losing battle. Update 5. Hi again, quick update because I'm super busy. The divorce is officially finalized, and the outcome? Honestly, Dad hit the jackpot. Susan walked away with nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no ridiculous child support she tried to claim out of nowhere. She fought dirty, but it didn't work. So now it's just us. We kept everything, and for the first time in a long time, life feels calm. I already have my new passport, and Dad and I have started planning our India trip again. This time, it's really happening. I can't even describe how excited I am. More importantly, I'm genuinely happy now. Thank you all for your support along the way.
Flirting with 19-year-olds. I'm 31 years old and recently came out of a long-term relationship. I was emotionally wrecked and trying to get back to feeling normal. One night, a friend and I went to a nice bar restaurant downtown. a place where people of all ages usually hang out. While we were there, a group of girls was celebrating a birthday. Staff came out singing happy birthday, and they brought a cake with candles shaped like the number 19. The birthday girl was attractive, so I decided to go over and say hello. Her friends were also pretty. My friend immediately told me it was a bad idea and said they looked way too young. At first, he didn't even want to come with me, but eventually followed along just to make sure nothing went wrong. We congratulated the birthday girl, and at first, everything seemed fine. The girls laughed, and I thought the conversation was going okay. Then, suddenly, one of them snapped and told me to take the hint and leave. I was caught off guard and apologized, but she said I was making them uncomfortable and needed to read the room. Another girl asked us to go. I was about to leave, but then someone compared me to R. Kelly. That hit a nerve. Being associated with predatory behavior made me furious. I told them that comparison was unfair and ridiculous. We were all adults. My friend tried to pull me away, but I stood my ground. The birthday girl said it was weird for someone my age to flirt with them, especially when it was obvious they were uncomfortable. She made another R. Kelly joke, asking if she reminded me of a certain singer. That pushed me over the edge. I apologized again for making them uncomfortable, but said that didn't give them the right to label me a predator. One of them said that was my problem, not theirs. I argued that adults are allowed to flirt with other adults. It's not illegal. Eventually, one of them yelled at me to leave. I walked away furious and humiliated. As I did, their entire table started singing Ignition Remix and laughing hysterically. Back at our table, I was shaking with anger. My friend told me the whole situation was my fault and that it had been obvious from the start that they were uncomfortable. I pointed out that they had been laughing, but he said it was nervous laughter, not genuine. I said I had every right to be upset about being called a creep when they were all 18 or 19. That's a serious accusation. My ex was 6 years older than me. My friend said they weren't calling me a predator, just a creepy older guy hitting on teenagers. He agreed the singing was immature, but I should have left much earlier. I felt like he should have defended me. In the end, I wondered if I was wrong for defending myself or for approaching them at all. Later, I accepted that my pride had gotten in the way. I can't undo what happened, but next time, I'll do better. Update from the birthday girl. I never had an account on this forum before, but our journalism professor showed it to us, and sometimes I browse the front page. A few weeks ago, I came across a post that was clearly about my birthday dinner. At first, I didn't care, but after reading it, I felt the need to clarify a few things. This wasn't a club. It was a restaurant that happened to serve alcohol. Families were sitting nearby. We were just eating dinner and talking. He came over and wished me a happy birthday. I said thank you, and we went back to our conversation. The problem was that he didn't leave. We awkwardly laughed and kept talking amongst ourselves. He stayed. Every time he spoke, we nodded politely and turned away. We said thanks, have a good night, multiple times. He still stood there. His friend kept trying to leave. I was awkward and irritated, but I stayed polite. I even offered him a piece of cake to take with him and said goodbye again. He took the cake, sat down at our table, and said the night wasn't over yet. That's when my friend snapped. If she hadn't, I would have. When she called him R. Kelly, she wasn't accusing him of committing crimes. She was calling him creepy. Grown men in their 30s hitting on us feel creepy, period. We were polite the entire time. I gave him countless hints. His own friend was trying to escape, and then he had the nerve to argue with us instead of leaving. When he finally walked away, we started singing Ignition amongst ourselves and toward him. It's an old song our parents used to play. We turned a gross situation into a funny moment instead of letting it ruin my birthday. One more thing. When he asked our ages and announced his, it made everything worse. A 30-year-old man trying to flirt with 18 and 19-year-olds at a birthday dinner is uncomfortable. It always is. For those saying he wasn't ugly, that's irrelevant. If I'd met him under different circumstances, I could have introduced him to my aunt, but he was too old for us and the situation was inappropriate. Being told you're legal is degrading. The entire interaction felt nauseating. When he asked our ages, it felt like he was checking IDs at a family restaurant. I'm done being polite to men who act entitled to our time and attention.
My husband secretly booked business class tickets for himself and his mother for our honeymoon, leaving me with a seat in economy class. So I exposed him right there in the airport lobby, in front of everyone. I'm 32 and my husband Van is 36. We got married recently. We had been together for 4 years and engaged for 8 months. I met him when I was 29. At the time, I worked as a bar manager, and he used to come in regularly as a customer. We started talking, and eventually he asked me out. I turned him down at first, but he kept coming back to the bar, always finding excuses to chat with me. My coworkers joked that it was kind of sweet. Eventually, I decided to give him a chance, and from there, everything took off. Van is, in many ways, wonderful. He's affectionate, kind, emotionally mature, financially independent, and always plans our dates. The only issue I ever had was his mother, Naomi. Before anyone judges me, I want to explain. When I first met her, I actually liked her. Van was 13 when his parents divorced. His father, Matt, cheated on Naomi with a coworker. Naomi was completely devastated. They had been together since college, and she believed they would grow old together. Matt begged for forgiveness, saying he had never been with anyone else and that this was a stupid mistake caused by losing his head. But Naomi refused to forgive him and filed for divorce. What Matt did was awful, but Van was too young to fully understand what was happening. He was just heartbroken watching his family fall apart. He lived with his mother during the week to stay close to school and spent weekends with his father. Despite his mistake, Matt was a good father to Van. He supported him, attended every school event and sports game, showed up for parent-teacher meetings, and most importantly, allowed Van to be himself. Naomi, on the other hand, became extremely strict after the divorce. Van believes her behavior changed because of the betrayal. She became obsessively controlling. According to Van, he wasn't allowed to stay out late with friends, date girls, go on school trips or picnics, be near lakes or pools, sleep over at friends' houses. When he told me about these rules, they sounded ridiculous. Van explained that his mother justified everything by saying she was lonely without him and just wanted to protect him from the world. Unsurprisingly, Van quickly realized he felt much more comfortable living with his father. Matt's rules were simple. Don't stay out too late, and always share your location when going out with friends in case of emergencies. When school trips came up, Naomi would forbid Van from going, but Matt would sign the permission forms and encourage him to participate. This caused massive fights between Naomi and Matt, with Naomi threatening legal action. If Van wanted to hang out with friends, Naomi would say no, so he waited for weekends at his dad's place to finally have some freedom. As a teenager, he grew to hate living with his mother. They argued constantly. She criticized his clothes, his hair, and his friends. He spent most weekdays locked in his room, counting down the days until Friday, when he could escape to his dad's house. When Van was 17, Matt introduced him to his new partner, Heather. Heather is a kind woman who treated Van like her own son. She struggled with infertility and had accepted that she would never have children. Meeting Matt and learning he had a son was something she genuinely welcomed. Van adored her. She became a second mother to him. For Naomi, this was unacceptable. She couldn't tolerate another woman in her son's life. She caused endless scandals and tried to poison Van against Heather, claiming that Matt must have cheated with her during the marriage, which wasn't true. Heather entered Matt's life long after the divorce. Naomi refused to accept this reality and began making Matt's life difficult, even preventing him from seeing his son. When weekends came, Naomi would say Van couldn't go to his father because Heather was some unknown woman and she wouldn't allow her son to stay with strangers. The conflicts became uglier and uglier. When Van turned 18, he was accepted into 2 universities.
Naomi pressured him to choose the one closest to her home so she could visit him every week. Van didn't like that university. It lacked proper programs in his field. He discussed it honestly with his father. Matt told him he should choose what was best for himself, regardless of Naomi's wishes, but Van was terrified of upsetting her. In the end, he chose the university farther away. Naomi exploded. She screamed that he was abandoning her, that all men were the same. She threatened to kick him out and said she wouldn't pay for his education unless he did what she wanted. Van called his father, and Matt immediately came to help him pack and move out. That was the last day Van lived with his mother.
Just to clarify, being someone's +1 meant that Van was expected to take his mother as his guest to various events, for example, company parties or work functions. From what I later understood, even when we traveled, she demanded that he constantly share his location, claiming it helped her sleep peacefully at night. All of this made me deeply uncomfortable. I could clearly see Van being torn apart between wanting a normal adult life and feeling obligated to take care of his emotionally unstable mother. He didn't want to meet all her demands, but he was terrified that she might do something extreme again. Unlike his mother, his father Matt was calm, grounded, and emotionally healthy. I had met Matt and his wife Heather many times, and they were always warm and welcoming. They never asked intrusive questions. Matt showed genuine interest in my life without ever trying to belittle me. I saw many of Matt's best qualities reflected in Van. That's probably why I stayed. I knew Van was more than the damage his mother had caused him. I understood that he needed therapy, and I gently encouraged him to seek it, but he always insisted that he was fine. When Van proposed to me, completely out of the blue, it became one of the happiest days of my life. He surprised me by bringing my parents and my best friend into town so they could be part of the moment. Matt and Heather were there too, congratulating us wholeheartedly. The only person missing was Naomi. Van said she wasn't feeling well. Honestly, I was relieved. I didn't want her saying something inappropriate in front of my parents. I knew they would instantly dislike her if she did. We were having a wonderful time when Van suddenly received a call from the hospital. His mother had fallen down the stairs. We all rushed there, but Naomi refused to see me or anyone else. She demanded that only Van be allowed into her room, so we waited outside. I found that strange. We were all there out of concern, but it didn't feel appropriate to say anything at the time. When Van came out, he said she would be fine. According to the doctor, she had a fracture and needed to stay overnight. Naomi wanted Van to stay with her. Matt immediately offered to stay instead, pointing out that she would be sleeping anyway and that Van should take me home. But Van refused. He said his mother wouldn't like that and he didn't want to upset her further. So we all went home. My parents and my friend helped me clean up afterward. Van booked them hotel rooms for the night, but they chose to stay with me instead. I think they could see how sad I was, that I wouldn't be spending the night with my fiancé on the very day he proposed. That should have been my first warning sign that things were only going to get worse. Wedding planning quickly turned into what Naomi wants. She interfered with my wedding dress, chose the flower girl, commented on Van's suit, controlled the guest list, the venue, almost every single detail. Van and I have long planned our honeymoon in Hawaii, but Naomi insisted that flying that far was unacceptable and that somewhere closer would be much better. That was when I finally tried to set a boundary. I told her calmly but firmly, no. Naomi was shocked and said it was disrespectful to speak to her that way. I replied honestly that the honeymoon was for Van and me, and the decision was ours. She immediately burst into tears, telling Van that I was excluding her, ignoring her, and pushing her out of his life. She accused me of trying to steal her son, which was absurd. I reminded her that I had already accepted her choice of officiant, venue, cake, and even the dresses for my bridesmaids. I had tried to accommodate her wishes wherever possible, but I would not allow her to dictate where we went on our honeymoon. Van was caught in the middle. He tried to talk to her, but she framed herself as a martyr, a mother sacrificing everything for her son. Later, I even sent her an apologetic message, knowing how much she meant to Van. Her reply chilled me. She said no woman would ever take her son away from her, and that I should know my place. I immediately showed the message to Van. He called his mother to confront her, but she accused me of trying to drive a wedge between them and insisted that he should always love and believe her more than me. I was deeply hurt. After the call, I told Van exactly how it made me feel. To his credit, he agreed. He reassured me that we would stick to our plan and go to Hawaii. I was relieved. It felt like Van was finally starting to set boundaries. I believed we could enjoy our honeymoon far away from her controlling presence. The wedding itself went smoothly, without major incidents. However, during the reception, my mother-in-law somehow managed to give a speech entirely about herself, emphasizing how much she had sacrificed in her life. It felt like a quiet attempt to reclaim attention even on our day. Still, I chose to focus on the positives. My parents, Matt, Heather, and our guests had a great time. We danced all night. I went to bed excited, knowing we were leaving for Hawaii the next day. On the morning of our honeymoon, I woke up in an amazing mood. Van and I headed to the airport, and I felt genuinely happy until we arrived. That's when I discovered that Van had booked himself a business class seat and me an economy seat. I was stunned. I would have happily paid for business class myself. Van had insisted on handling the travel arrangements, so I assumed we would be sitting together. When I asked him what was going on, he said he had found a great deal and upgraded his ticket, but there were no business class seats left for me. It didn't sit right with me. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He brushed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal, just a few hours. I told him that if it really didn't matter, then he could sit in economy while I took business class. He snapped. He accused me of being overly sensitive and said we'd see each other after landing. When I asked where he was going, he said he was heading to the business lounge. I was completely confused and hurt. I tried calling him, but he ignored every call. My suspicion grew stronger. Something felt very wrong. Then my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. She never called me directly unless she couldn't reach Van. I answered, intending to tell her that Van would call her back soon. Instead, she started asking where exactly I was sitting in the airport, which cafe, which lounge. Already overwhelmed, I finally asked her what she wanted. After a brief pause, she mockingly told me not to lose my composure because she was also flying with us on our honeymoon. I completely lost it. I shouted, demanding to know what kind of sick joke this was. Naomi calmly explained that she wanted to stay close to her son and didn't want him flying so far away, so she had convinced him to bring her along. I hung up, furious, and marched straight to the business lounge. Security didn't want to let me in, but I told them my husband was inside and that I urgently needed to speak to him about his mother. After a long argument, they finally let me through, and that's when I saw Van, sitting comfortably, scrolling through his phone.
So his phone had been in his hands the entire time. He had been deliberately ignoring my calls. I walked up to him and he looked up, clearly shocked to see me there with security. He asked what was going on, but I didn't waste time. I asked him directly if it was true that his mother was flying with us on our honeymoon. Van froze. I asked if that was the real reason he'd bought me a separate ticket, so I wouldn't find out that he was planning to spend our honeymoon with his mommy. His face turned bright red. People around us started staring. Even the security guard seemed invested in the scene. That was when my mother-in-law walked into the lounge, scanning the room for Van. When she saw us, she stopped dead in her tracks. I told Van that she herself had told me everything.
That's when he started stumbling through excuses. He said that originally he had booked economy tickets for just the two of us, but Naomi had cried and begged him, and in an attempt to keep everyone happy, he brought separate tickets and tried to hide it from me. He claimed he had booked her a completely different hotel and that she wouldn't bother us. Naomi stepped in, as she always did. She said I should be grateful that her son loved her so much, and that it was no big deal if she came along. After all, she had never been so far away from her boy before. I was shaking with rage. If we hadn't been in an airport, I would have lost it completely. Instead, I raised my voice and told my husband that I was ashamed to be married to a child who couldn't go anywhere without his mother. I said he looked more like her husband than her son. Van whispered that I was embarrassing him in front of respectable people and that we could talk about it after landing. I laughed in his face. I told him to enjoy his honeymoon with his mommy because I was done. Both of them stared at me in shock as I walked away. I tore my tickets in half and called a taxi home. Van ended up not flying either. He came home later and started yelling at me, saying I had no right to speak to me like that and that he was only trying to do the right thing. He said his mother flew alone because she didn't want to lose her ticket. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried. I couldn't even look at him. All of this happened yesterday, and ever since then, I felt like I'm in a fog. I know with painful clarity that our marriage is over. He hasn't apologized. He barely speaks to me. And it hurts. Leaving a marriage is a massive step, especially when, just 3 days ago, I believed I would spend my entire life with him. That's why I came here. I needed to know if I was wrong for walking away after my husband tried to bring his mother on our honeymoon. Update 1. I'm overwhelmed by the support I received. Hundreds of comments and private messages. When I wrote my post, I never expected so many strangers to care. After reading everything, I agree with those who said I needed to have one final, honest conversation with my husband. If he continues to side with his mother, I will have no choice but to end this marriage. I can't spend my entire life fighting this. Naomi clearly doesn't care about us, considering she still flew to Hawaii alone, fully aware that all of this chaos was caused by her. I'll update after we talk. Update 2. A month has passed since my last update, and a lot has happened. After the airport incident, I made a decision. The situation was unbearable, and I couldn't live in limbo without a real conversation. I packed my things and waited for Van to come home from work. That conversation would either save our marriage or destroy it. When Van walked in and saw me waiting, I saw surprise and fear flash across his face. I asked him to sit down and handed him a glass of water. The tension in the room was almost suffocating. We hadn't spoken since the incident because he still believed I owed him an apology. I took a deep breath and told him everything, how his mother had made me feel all this time. I explained how I saw him change whenever she was around, how he seemed to become a different person. I told him I understood the crushing guilt he carried over her past, over her sacrifices, and how she constantly used that guilt to control him. But it was slowly destroying the foundation of our relationship. I cried as I explained how deeply she had invaded my life, not just our wedding, but even our honeymoon. I told him I fell in love with his kindness and warmth, but his relationship with his mother was tearing apart everything we had built. When I finished, I saw tears streaming down his face. He admitted he had no idea I felt this way. He said he had spent his entire life caring for his mother, living in constant fear that something terrible might happen to her. He confessed that he had become so used to putting her needs above everyone else's that he no longer knew how to stop. He admitted he knew bringing her on the honeymoon was wrong, but she leaned on his guilt and he gave in, convincing himself it would somehow be better for everyone. I told him that if his mother truly cared about him, she wouldn't have flown to Hawaii alone and left him behind. He nodded and admitted he had been blind to her manipulation until now. He broke down completely, dropped to his knees, and apologized over and over again. My heart shattered. I hugged him, realizing how much internal pain he was carrying. It became clear that he needed therapy, and if he truly recognized his mistakes and was willing to work on them, I was willing to give this marriage a chance. Within the next 2 weeks, Van booked appointments and began seeing a therapist. He also had an honest conversation with his father.
Update 3. Matt had no idea how bad things had gotten and was genuinely shocked by how far Naomi had pushed everything. His father told him the same thing I had, that it was time for Van to stop living in constant anxiety over his mother and finally start living his own life, without excuses. With the help of his therapist, Van decided to move to low contact with his mother. He understood that he needed space to untangle his thoughts and emotions. It wasn't an easy decision. Naomi was calling him non-stop, as expected. He hasn't told her yet that he's seeing a therapist. He knows she'll completely lose it when she finds out. He plans to tell her this coming weekend and ask for space. If she refuses, he's prepared to block her entirely. Overall, I see this as real progress and a necessary step toward healing our relationship. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but for the first time, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Update 4, 3 months later. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I want to thank everyone who followed my story and supported me. The past few months have been an emotional roller coaster, and the encouragement from this community meant more to me than I can express. First of all, Van did talk to his mother after working through things in therapy. As expected, it went terribly. She unleashed a torrent of accusations, screaming that I had stolen him from her. She demanded that he divorce me, insisting that I was the cause of all the problems and that everything had been perfect before I came into his life. But this time, Van finally stood his ground. He firmly told her that he would no longer tolerate her manipulation. He made it clear that she had to respect our marriage and our private life. Then he made a difficult but decisive choice. He blocked her number. I did the same. It was necessary for our mental health and for the survival of our relationship. Of course, Naomi began telling anyone who would listen that her son had abandoned her and that she had been treated horribly. Gossip and rumors reached us through relatives and mutual acquaintances, but we stayed focused on our own lives. Matt, Van's father, played an important role during this time. He checked in on Naomi occasionally to make sure she was safe and taking her medication. After cutting contact with his mother, Van's condition noticeably improved. The constant cloud of anxiety and guilt that had followed him for years finally lifted. We started going on dates again, uninterrupted by endless phone calls. We were finally able to just enjoy each other. As for our honeymoon, Van wanted to make things right. He surprised me with a trip to Hawaii. This time, we both flew business class, and we had the calm, romantic vacation we had originally dreamed of. It was a beautiful trip, one that helped us reconnect and create a positive memory where there had once been so much pain. Overall, I feel happy and optimistic about our future, despite everything we've been through. My husband's growth and the effort he's putting into our relationship are impossible to miss. If anything new happens, I'll be sure to post another update.
7 years after our breakup, my ex showed up at my door with a child, demanding child support. A moment later, my wife stepped outside, and that was when my life truly went off the rails. Cindy and I met in college. We were both 23 when we started dating, and we stayed together for 4 years. After graduation, we rented an apartment and lived there for about a year, until she suddenly left me without any explanation. Cindy was a year older than me and in her final year of college when we met. I was painfully shy, so she was the one who made the first move. She asked me out. She was the first to say, "I love you." 6 months into the relationship, she was also the one who suggested we move in together after college. She was an amazing girlfriend in many ways, kind, affectionate, deeply emotional, but there was one serious issue: her overwhelming insecurity. I'm not sure where it came from. Maybe it was because I rarely initiated things in the relationship, or maybe it was something deeper, but she was constantly jealous and suspicious. She hated it whenever I talked to other women, no matter who they were. After a few arguments, I stopped talking to all my female friends. Cindy mattered more to me than any friendship. I cut off not only friends from college, but also girls I'd known since high school, people I'd been close to for over 5 years. Today, I'm back in touch with them.
Cindy is no longer part of my life, and my wife has no problem with me having friends of any gender. But back then, I was only allowed to spend time with guys, and even that was restricted. Cindy didn't allow boys' nights, convinced they were just excuses to go drinking, get drunk, and hook up with someone. It felt unfair. She forbade me from seeing anyone without her because of her insecurity, but at the time, I couldn't fully grasp how unhealthy this was. I was deeply in love with her and believed she loved me just as much. She constantly told me she couldn't live without me, that she saw no future without me, that I was everything to her. So I stayed. I wanted to marry her. That was all I wanted back then. Over time, though, the relationship became harder and harder to survive. She grew more suspicious, more controlling, more unstable. Once we were living together, I couldn't do anything without her hovering behind me. She checked my phone regularly, tracked my movements, and if I didn't tell her exactly where I was, she threatened not to let me back into the apartment. By this point, it's probably clear how toxic things had become. What still amazes me is that despite everything, she was the one who ended things. The breakup happened over something incredibly small. One afternoon, my sister Lauren dropped by unannounced, something she occasionally did. Normally, she would message both of us beforehand so Cindy wouldn't get suspicious or think I had another woman over. But that day, Cindy wasn't home. She was visiting a friend. She was allowed to see her friends. I was not allowed to question it. Lauren and I talked for about 2 hours. Then her boss called and she had to rush back to work. Before leaving, she pulled out a lipstick to touch up her makeup, and in her hurry, she accidentally left it on the couch. I didn't even notice. Cindy came home minutes later, cheerful and relaxed, until she sat down on the couch. She jumped up instantly, holding the lipstick she had just sat on. I knew immediately that I was doomed. I told her the truth right away. I explained that Lauren had stopped by during her lunch break, that she used the lipstick before heading back to work, and that she must have forgotten it in her rush. Cindy didn't believe a word. She said Lauren usually texted both of us before visiting. This time she hadn't. Cindy also claimed it made no sense for Lauren to use lipstick at our place, since my sister rarely wore makeup. She was convinced I had brought another woman into our home. She completely lost control. She started screaming, swearing, throwing things, first pillows, then books, then she crossed a line. She grabbed the TV remote and threw it straight at me. I'd barely managed to dodge it. That was the moment I had to get out. I ran into the bedroom and locked the door. I didn't have my phone with me, so I couldn't call anyone for help. I sat alone in that room for nearly an hour while she screamed outside, accusing me of betraying her. She sounded unhinged. I was genuinely afraid. Eventually, the screaming stopped. I gathered the courage to step outside. The apartment was empty. The front door was open. I didn't text or call her for the next couple of hours, assuming she went out to cool off, but when she still hadn't returned by midnight, I tried calling her. The call wouldn't go through. After a few attempts, I realized she had blocked me. I tried messaging her, blocked there too. She had also removed me from all her social media. I panicked and tried contacting her friends, but none of them answered. I later realized I was likely blocked by them as well. For weeks, I tried everything to reach her. She ignored me completely. After nearly a month, I finally gave up. I understood she didn't want to be found. I was devastated. The months that followed were the darkest period of my life. I don't even know how I survived it. I went to work, came home, missed her endlessly, and pretended everything was fine. People told me I was better off without her. I didn't feel that way. I stayed in that apartment for a full year, hoping she might come back. I thought if I stayed, she would know where to find me. When I finally moved out, I buried the last hope of ever seeing her again. We never got closure. That unresolved ending remains one of the deepest pains I carry. I fell into a severe depression and avoided women entirely, afraid that moving on would make me a traitor to Cindy. That changed when I met my current wife, Emmy. She was a coworker, warm, kind, welcoming, not just to me, but to everyone in the office. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had an incredible personality. Despite all my efforts to keep my distance, I fell in love with her within a few months. I'd promised myself I'd never enter another relationship after Cindy, but Emmy changed everything. We've been together for almost 4 years now, married for 2. I'm genuinely happy with her. And until recently, I'd almost completely forgotten about Cindy, until the day she suddenly reappeared in my life.
7 years had passed since our breakup, or more accurately, since the moment she erased me from her life as if I had never mattered, all because of a ridiculous argument. Last weekend, my wife and I were simply relaxing at home when someone suddenly rang the doorbell. I went to answer it. Before I even had time to fully process who was standing there, she shoved a small boy into my arms. He looked about 7 years old. Cindy immediately demanded that I pay child support for the past 7 years. She didn't give me a chance to say a single word. She started screaming, claiming that for 7 years she had been trying to find me so her son could finally have a father. She accused me of running away from responsibility and insisted that I owed her years of unpaid support. I stood there in silence while she yelled. I didn't even know how to react. I was completely stunned. I just stood there like an idiot while she kept shouting. The accusations made no sense. I had waited an entire year after she vanished, hoping she would come back. She was the one who left me, not the other way around, and I was absolutely certain that the child wasn't mine. I stayed silent only because I was in shock. I couldn't even speak. When Emmy realized I had disappeared for a while, she came outside to see what was going on, and that was when everything flipped upside down. The moment Cindy saw my wife, all the color drained from her face. It was instantly clear that she was in serious trouble. At the time, I didn't yet understand why, but it was obvious that seeing Emmy completely rattled her. Emmy looked just as shocked to see Cindy standing at our door. Before I could say anything, the two of them started screaming at each other. I couldn't even follow what they were arguing about, but it was obvious they knew each other. This wasn't a first encounter. They went straight for each other, hurling insults, throwing the most vile words imaginable back and forth. Meanwhile, I stood there silently next to the boy, trying to understand what the hell was happening. Then, Emmy finally brought out the heavy artillery. She told Cindy that if she didn't leave immediately, she was calling the police. That clearly wasn't an option Cindy wanted. She looked absolutely furious, but after one last round of insults and hateful looks thrown at both of us, she backed down. The moment Emmy repeated that she was calling the cops, Cindy grabbed her son and bolted as fast as she could. I had no idea what I had just witnessed. I assumed Emmy would explain everything once Cindy was gone. Instead, things somehow got even stranger. As soon as the door closed, Emmy turned to me and started yelling, asking how I could do this to her, how I could hide something like this from her. I still said nothing. I just stared at her in complete confusion. Her accusations made no sense to me. She acted as if I had deliberately hidden my past relationship with Cindy, but that wasn't true. I had always been open with Emmy. I told her everything about my ex. The only thing I hadn't done was show her pictures of Cindy. Not because I was hiding anything, there was simply nothing to show. I had lost my old phone before we moved into the new house. Every photo I had of Cindy was on that phone. When I lost it, I lost all of them. On top of that, I had already deleted most of our photos from social media because they were too painful to look at. Seeing reminders of how she disappeared without explanation hurt too much. So, first I deleted the photos, then I lost the phone, and that was it. No pictures left anywhere. I never tried to recover them. Honestly, I thought it was for the best. Fewer reminders. A few group photos still existed on my friends' accounts, but I asked them to remove those too. I didn't want to see myself with her. If Emmy had ever asked to see what Cindy looked like, I would have shown her whatever I could find. But she never asked, and digging through other people's albums for old photos felt pointless, especially since Emmy never showed any interest. So she never saw Cindy's face. After everything that happened, Emmy said she needed to go stay with her parents for a while, to cool off, sort through her feelings, and maybe come back later. I begged her to stay, but she left anyway.
She said she couldn't be in the same space with me right now and needed time alone to process everything. I didn't even fully understand what she meant. She didn't explain. The whole situation felt like déjà vu, like history repeating itself, just like with Cindy. I was completely crushed. The next day, I finally forced myself to start making calls, trying to understand what was really going on. I called her parents first. They immediately attacked me, saying I should have told them about Cindy beforehand and not let everything explode like this. They tore into me and then hung up without giving me any real answers. Desperate, I called Emmy's older sister. She was the only person left who might explain something. I was lost, and she was my last hope. When she answered, I told her everything that had happened. That was when I finally learned the truth. Cindy and Emmy were cousins. Cindy's real name was Cynthia. The names I'm using here aren't their real ones, and I never called her that myself, which is why Emmy never made the connection. Apparently, Cindy had always been cruel and had been tormenting Emmy since childhood. Their relationship had been strained for years, but everything completely collapsed on Emmy's 18th birthday. Cindy slept with Emmy's boyfriend, the one she had been dating for nearly 3 years. The entire family exploded. Emmy's mother, who was Cindy's mother's sister, caused a massive scandal over Cindy's behavior. Naturally, each side defended their own child, and the families completely cut contact after that. But it didn't end there. Cindy continued to harass Emmy by spreading disgusting rumors about her online. Things escalated so badly that the parents had to intervene again. Only then did Cindy finally leave Emmy alone, and only because her parents forced her to. The cousins never spoke again, until they met again because of me. After that conversation, everything finally made sense. I understood why Emmy lost control when she saw Cindy on our doorstep. Seeing her, or Cynthia as Emmy knew her, dragged painful memories back to the surface for both of us. I spoke to Emmy after that call. Her sister had clearly spoken to her as well, because for the first time, Emmy finally answered my call. Until then, she had been rejecting every one. I told her I understood why she reacted the way she did, but I also told her the truth, that she never asked, never shown any interest in Cindy, and that I never meant to hide anything from her.
That made complete sense to me. All of that was in the past, and she was my future. If she had asked me even once about Cindy, I would have shown her a photo immediately, and all of this would have been resolved long ago. I tried to calmly explain my point of view, but for some reason she still believed I was at fault, that I should have talked more about my past relationship. According to her, if I had done that, she might have asked questions herself, and we would have discovered everything earlier. I honestly didn't understand what exactly I had done wrong, and I told her that. That only made things worse. She became even angrier and stopped talking to me, calling me stupid and self-absorbed before hanging up. She said she had gone through hell because of Cindy and expected me to understand that. I replied that I had gone through hell with her too, but I didn't see Emmy trying to understand me. That seemed to hit a nerve. She snapped, "Fine, you win the contest for having the worst ex," and ended the call. Since then, she hasn't answered my calls or messages. I feel like I completely screwed everything up. My wife doesn't lose her temper easily, so it was obvious this was a deeply painful and sensitive subject for her. But damn it, it was painful for me too. Putting all the blame on me alone felt unfair, especially when I genuinely didn't understand what I was supposed to have done differently. The only thing I was grateful for was that Cindy hadn't shown up again. If she kept inserting herself into my life, this mess would only get worse. Update 1. First of all, thank you to everyone who shared advice and thoughts. I truly appreciated every response. For those who asked whether my wife had ever mentioned being bullied in the past, no, she hadn't. She never talked about her childhood. I only learned about it after speaking with her sister. Even though I knew this wasn't technically my fault, I decided to take initiative and go to my wife's parents' house. I wanted to save our relationship. I understood that if I wanted to be with Emmy, I had to try to fix things, even if I wasn't the one who caused them. Because we're supposed to fight the problem together, not each other. Yesterday, after almost a week of silence, I finally went to see her. Both Emmy and her parents were surprised to see me at the door. I didn't wait for their reaction. The moment the door opened, I hugged her tightly. She froze for a second, then hugged me back. We stood there like that for several minutes without saying a word. The past week had been brutal for both of us, and we both realized that more than anything, we just wanted to be together. Who was right and who was wrong no longer mattered. As soon as I let go, she apologized and broke down crying. She admitted she had genuinely thought she'd lost me forever because of her outburst after Cindy's visit and the way she behaved afterwards. She admitted she acted irrationally and unfairly, apologizing over and over. Her parents and I comforted her while she cried. It meant a lot to see that she recognized she hadn't been fair to me. At the same time, I felt guilty for not coming to see her sooner, because that delay was what finally pushed her over the edge. After we talked everything through, she packed her things and came home with me. We're back together now. I can't say everything is completely back to normal, but we're working on it. We're slowly unpacking everything that happened over the past week, including Cindy's visit. And we still needed to figure out why she showed up in the first place. Update 2. We finally learned why Cindy came to our house. No surprises. She wanted money. She made that clear immediately by demanding child support for a child I had absolutely no connection to, emotionally or biologically. Emmy and her sister made several calls to figure out what was really going on, since the families hadn't spoken in years. They confirmed what I already knew. The child is not mine. Apparently, she had been seeing another man for years. I strongly suspect she was cheating on me during the final months of our relationship. I don't have proof, but everything lines up. She dumped me on the most ridiculous excuse and erased me from my life like I never existed. It makes perfect sense that she already had someone else lined up. Most likely, she was already pregnant when she left me and just needed a reason to disappear. The incident of my sister was the perfect excuse. Many of her relatives knew about the other man, but I was forbidden from communicating with her family unless Cindy herself was present, so I knew nothing and never would have if she hadn't made the massive mistake of showing up at my house trying to pressure me into giving me money. It turned out the man she was with left her a few months ago. She had quit her job when she got involved with him and had no savings after giving birth. When he disappeared, she was left with nothing. He did exactly what she had done to me, vanished without explanation. Now she's barely scraping by. Her parents refused to support her financially, saying they needed to save for retirement. If they supported her and the child, they wouldn't be able to retire at all. Harsh, maybe, but now her desperation made sense. After the incident at my house, none of Cindy's relatives have seen her. I'm sure someone will eventually track her down or report her, because rumors say she's already scammed a few people out of money. They're just rumors for now, but after what she tried to pull with me, I wouldn't be surprised if they were true. Update 3. We decided to start couples therapy along with individual sessions. It turns out we hadn't dealt with our past as well as we thought. Cindy's mere appearance was enough to throw our lives into chaos. We couldn't allow that to happen again. As for Cindy, according to some relatives, she's now living with a new man she met online just days ago. He's already madly in love with her and invited her to move in. Her parents are devastated, not just by her behavior, but by the fact that she told them they're no longer allowed to see their grandchild. I'm not taking her side, but honestly, what did they expect? They turned away when she needed them most, and now they're shocked things aren't fine. They've always enabled her behavior, towards me and towards Emmy. Her parents were never particularly pleasant people, and she's no different. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. What truly breaks my heart is that a child is the one paying the price for all her terrible decisions. That's where this story ends.
My husband's daughter from his first marriage tried to claim his house through a will, but court revealed the most terrifying truth. I'm 45 years old. I've been married to my husband, Michael, for 10 years now. He's 50. We were both in our early 30s when we first met at a local art gallery. We were standing in front of the same painting and started talking about it. It felt like instant connection, the kind where you feel like you've known someone your whole life. Michael asked me out, and the more time we spent together, the deeper that feeling became. I'm the oldest of 3 children. My family never had much money. We survived, but luxuries were rare. Fast food was something we only had on birthdays. Our father taught us early on that hard work was the only way forward. I studied relentlessly, worked my way into college on my own, and even modeled part-time to support myself. By graduation, I had no student debt. I kept climbing professionally and was working as a junior lawyer when Michael and I met. Michael's background was very different. His family was financially comfortable. His father had a well-paid position with strong benefits, so money was never a concern for them. His parents paid for his college, and thanks to his father's influence, Michael landed an internship at the same company. From there, he built his own career through genuine effort and dedication. Despite our different upbringings, we bonded deeply over a shared love of art and music. That's what brought us together. Michael has a daughter from his previous marriage, Candace. From the very beginning, she disliked me. She was distant, cold, and avoided conversations whenever we were in the same room. It felt like she blamed me for her parents' divorce, even though I met Michael long after it was finalized. I understood her pain and tried to give her time and space. For context, Michael and his ex-wife, Amelia, were married only 3 years. They met in college and married young. After the wedding, everything changed. Amelia stayed home while Michael worked long hours. One day, Michael returned early from a business trip and found Amelia in bed with his best friend, Tom. In a single moment, he lost both his marriage and his closest friendship. Devastated, Michael filed for divorce. The process was brutal. Amelia fought aggressively to keep the house, even though it legally belonged to Michael. The conflict escalated into a bitter custody battle over Candace. Because of Amelia's infidelity, the court ruled against her claim to the house, but granted shared custody so Candace could maintain a relationship with both parents. Amelia never forgave losing the house. Over the years, she filled Candace's head with resentment toward her father. Michael chose not to tell his daughter about her mother's affair, trying to protect her from the truth. I learned all of this early in our relationship. Michael wanted complete honesty, and I respected that deeply. At one point, Michael invited Candace to join us on a trip to Africa, hoping it would help us bond. I truly believed it might change things. Unfortunately, it was a disaster. Candace was hostile the entire trip. She snapped at me constantly, had angry outbursts, and hurled insults whenever I got close to Michael. She called me a gold digger more than once. Michael scolded her, but she only smirked, making it clear she had no intention of accepting me. Despite everything, our love was strong. After a whirlwind romance, we got married. It was a small ceremony with close friends and family. Candace and Amelia were invited. Neither showed up. The first years of our marriage were wonderful. We traveled often and focused on our careers. I loved my job and had no intention of giving it up. Amelia moved in with Tom after the divorce. Candace lived in an apartment Michael had bought for her and worked as a social media manager at a reputable company. 3 years into our marriage, we welcomed our son, Nick. My pregnancy was difficult, and Candace made it worse. Whenever Michael wasn't around, she made cruel comments about my weight and appearance. She told me Michael would leave me because I was fat and disgusting now. It shattered me. When I finally told Michael, he immediately stopped allowing Candace to visit our home. From then on, they only met in public places to protect my well-being. After Nick was born, we were overjoyed. I chose to return to work after maternity leave, and we hired a nanny to help. Financially, we were comfortable, but my independence meant deeply to me. Candace's hostility only grew after Nick's birth. At family gatherings, she would criticize him, mock him, and intentionally upset him until he ran to us in tears. I could tolerate her hatred toward me, but not toward my child. I banned her from our home entirely, and we stopped hosting family events. As we grew older, Michael and I began thinking seriously about the future. We decided to draft wills to put everything in order. Michael had already bought Candace an apartment, so he named me and our son as beneficiaries of the family home. Candace would receive his savings, investments, and remaining assets. I had my own assets, which I planned to leave entirely to Nick. We both felt this was fair and ensured our son's stability. When Amelia and Candace found out about the will, all hell broke loose. I don't know who told them, maybe Michael, maybe his parents, but their reaction was explosive. Amelia called Michael, demanding the house, claiming she was his first wife and deserved it. Michael refused. He reminded her that he paid child support, covered Candace's education, bought her an apartment, and would continue supporting her, but the house was meant for his son. Furious, Amelia sent me a long message filled with insults and threats. I showed it to Michael. He told me not to respond and to block her immediately. The next day, Candace showed up at our door, visibly upset. I knew exactly why she was there. To avoid exposing Nick to conflict, I arranged for my parents to pick him up. Once we were alone, Candace made her demand clear. She insisted that Nick and I give up the house because as Michael's first child, she believed it was rightfully hers. Despite my anger, I stayed silent and let Michael speak. He calmly told her that he had always provided for her and always would.
Michael assured Candace that he intended to leave her his savings. However, he also had a responsibility toward me and our son. As his wife, securing the family home for us was his way of ensuring our safety and stability. Candace immediately shifted the blame onto me, claiming that I should be the one to do the right thing. I calmly stated that I fully supported my husband's decision, which only made her angrier. She raised her voice and threatened to take me to court. At that point, I had no desire to escalate the conflict and asked her to leave us alone. As expected, a few weeks later, I received a court summons. Candace and Amelia had filed a lawsuit against me over the property. The claim stated that I had married Michael for his money and manipulated him into leaving me the family home. Michael and I consulted our lawyer, who confidently told us that neither Candace nor Amelia had any solid legal standing. Still, despite his reassurance, I couldn't shake my anxiety, especially because I didn't want our son dragged into this mess. As the court date approached, the tension in our home became unbearable. In court, Amelia's lawyer was relentless. He tried to argue that Michael was obligated to prioritize his firstborn daughter above everyone else. They pushed for a full jury trial to determine ownership of the house. Because we lived in Colorado, a jury trial was indeed required, making everything far more complicated. The looming trial kept Michael and me under constant stress. Amelia's legal team played dirty, digging into our past, searching for anything they could twist against us. Our lawyer did his best, but the pressure was overwhelming. Then something completely unexpected happened. Tom, the same man Michael had caught Amelia cheating with years ago, contacted us and insisted on meeting. Michael had cut him out of his life entirely after the affair and didn't want to see him, but I convinced him to listen. I felt that maybe this could help resolve everything faster. When Tom arrived, we half expected it to be another scheme orchestrated by Amelia's lawyer. Instead, Tom came to confess something devastating. Michael sat frozen as Tom admitted that his affair with Amelia had lasted far longer than anyone knew. It had begun even before her pregnancy. I held my breath as Tom continued. When Amelia became pregnant, she told Tom she believed the child was actually his. However, because Michael was financially stable, she chose to hide the truth and remain married to him. Tom begged her to tell Michael the truth, but she refused every time. I was stunned. Amelia had carried this lie for decades, all while aggressively fighting for the house, knowing full well she was hiding something monstrous.
Tom explained that he stayed silent because he believed Amelia loved him. But seeing the pain this lawsuit caused us finally made him realize who she really was. He broke down, crying, and begged Michael for forgiveness. Michael remained silent, completely shattered. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak watching my husband, a man who had believed his entire life that Candace was his daughter, learn that it had all been built on a lie. I had tolerated Amelia's cruelty and Candace's insults for years in the hope of maintaining some semblance of peace, but now there was no point in staying quiet. I immediately contacted our lawyer and shared Tom's confession. He explained that for it to hold weight in court, we needed concrete evidence, a DNA test. So we invited Candace over for dinner under the pretense of reconciliation. The plan was simple: discreetly obtain a glass or utensil for testing. Candace agreed to come, though she behaved exactly as she had always had, rude, cruel, and demeaning toward both me and my son. She mocked us, confident that she and her mother would win the case and that I would soon lose everything. I stayed silent, hoping this would be the last time we ever had to endure her behavior. After she left, we immediately handed her cup to our lawyer. On the morning of the court hearing, we received confirmation. Tom had told the truth. Candace was not Michael's biological daughter. I felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by deep sorrow for my husband, who had been manipulated and deceived for so many years. I told our lawyer I was ready to testify. He agreed it was the best course of action. Standing before the jury, I felt a storm of emotions: anger at Amelia's deception, compassion for Michael, and fierce determination to protect my family. I answered every question honestly. I spoke about my background, my career, and how I had never depended on Michael financially. I described the years of emotional abuse, mockery, and humiliation I endured from Amelia and Candace. Screenshots were presented as evidence. I explained how Candace had refused to attend our wedding and later verbally attacked our son. Then I revealed Tom's confession to the jury, the truth about Candace's paternity and the secret Amelia had hidden for decades. Candace stared at me in disbelief, whispering urgently to her lawyer. Our attorney then presented the DNA test results, confirming everything I had said. I watched Amelia's face crumble as the truth finally caught up with her. Candace looked like her world was collapsing, just as ours had when we learned the truth. The courtroom was silent. Everything was clear. Amelia and Candace had no legal claim left. The jury didn't take long to reach their verdict. The judge ruled that the family home would remain with us, exactly as Michael had intended. Candace and Amelia were found to have no legal rights to the property. In the days following the trial, reactions from friends and relatives were mixed. Most understood our decision and supported us. Others believed it was cruel to reveal the truth publicly, and Candace's life had been destroyed. But the truth is simple. The lies destroyed it, long before we ever stepped into that courtroom.
At the very least, I hope this situation became a life lesson for Candace. I truly believe that one day she may understand that this kind of strategy doesn't work. The truth always comes out eventually, and when it does, there are consequences. As for Michael, I think if Candace had treated him with genuine respect and kindness over the years, even after learning the truth about her biological father, he might have chosen to leave her something more. But that bridge had already been burned. Update 1. 3 days have passed since my last update. I read every message and piece of advice. Many people suggested that Candace might have already known about her mother's lie, but I truly don't believe that's the case. I saw her face in court when the DNA results were revealed. That shock was real. Winning the case lifted an enormous weight off my shoulders.
I've decided not to dwell on the opinions of relatives who think we acted wrongly. We didn't drag ourselves into court. Amelia and Candace did. We simply told the truth. What worries me now is my husband. Michael is still struggling to process everything. His world has been turned upside down. Since learning that Candace isn't biologically his, he barely eats and hardly sleeps. I can't imagine the pain of realizing that the child you loved and raised was part of such a deep betrayal. Amelia already put him through hell during the divorce. Now, learning that Tom, the man who slept with his wife, was also the biological father of his first child, has shattered him completely. I suggested therapy. He needs professional help to process this level of trauma. I scheduled an appointment for him, and he starts next week. Update 2. A month has passed, and we're slowly finding our footing again. Michael has been attending therapy regularly, and while healing will take time, I can see small improvements. Unexpectedly, Candace reached out to us last week. Honestly, I assumed she would never speak to us again. She called to apologize for everything we had gone through. I wasn't sure whether it was genuine remorse or simply anger toward her mother, but I chose not to interrogate her intentions. She admitted she had always been jealous of me, believing that I had taken her father away. She confessed she hated me, something I already knew. For years, she believed her father had betrayed her mother. But during the trial, when the truth came out, and it became clear that Amelia was the one who cheated, Candace realized she had been living a lie her entire life. She begged Michael not to leave her. He told her that regardless of biology, he would always be her father. That broke her completely. She cried harder than I had ever seen. She also apologized to me for how she treated me and said she hoped I could forgive her someday. I didn't pretend everything was suddenly fine. It wasn't. I told her honestly that I needed time before I could even think about being in the same room with her. Right now, my priority is my own family, my husband and my son. During the court battle, my child didn't get the attention he deserved. I'm planning a quiet family vacation to help us heal and reconnect. If anything else happens, I'll update again. Update 3. 3 months passed with no contact from Amelia until she showed up at our door. I hesitated to let her in, but I didn't want a public scene with neighbors listening. We made it clear that any outburst would result in the police being called. She came in tears. Tom had left her. He told her to move out by the end of the month and made it clear he no longer wanted to marry her. She had nowhere to go. She wanted to move in with Candace, who had absolutely refused. We learned that after the trial, Candace completely cut off contact with her mother, blaming her for years of manipulation and lies. Amelia came to us, hoping we would convince Candace to let her stay. Before I could even respond, Michael finally snapped. For the first time, I saw him truly lose his composure. He told Amelia that the apartment was bought solely for Candace, and only Candace had the right to decide who lived there. He reminded Amelia that she had never apologized for the affair, and now expected help. He said he was glad Tom had finally seen her for who she really was, and walked away. Amelia tried to justify herself, saying she was afraid of being thrown out while pregnant if she had told the truth back then. I couldn't listen anymore. We gave her a chance to speak, but there was nothing left to say. I asked her to leave. After she left, Michael contacted Candace to warn her if her mother moved in, getting her out later would be nearly impossible. Candace assured him that would never happen. She planned to change the locks and formally tell her mother she was done. As for me, I'm exhausted beyond words. Recently, Michael and I have been seriously discussing selling our house and moving to another state, leaving all of this behind for good. For the sake of our son and our marriage, we need peace. The decision isn't easy, but after Amelia's visit, it became clear that she would never stop trying to insert herself into our lives. Michael agreed. His job allows him to work remotely, and I'm willing to start over at a new firm if it means a healthier future for our family. Next month, we'll begin the process of selling our home. If all goes well, by the end of the year, we'll be starting a new life somewhere far away from all this toxicity. It's time to close this chapter and finally move forward.
I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life over 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake through mutual friends. He was 23 at the time. He had already graduated and was planning to move across the country to pursue graduate school. I was also planning a move, with friends, to a city just an hour and a half away from where he was going. We had a lot in common. We fell in love, and it felt like fate. Both of us planning to move 4,000 kilometers and almost to the same place. Jake had 2 sisters and a younger brother. They were all great people, and I got along with them right away. Since Jake was in grad school and I was working, I usually visited him on weekends. He rented a house with 2 roommates from his program. We were young, didn't have much money, but we had fun. We went on cheap dates and spent a lot of time at home. Jake bred and sold small animals. It was part of his studies. He was studying animal science, so being surrounded by animals was normal for him, and honestly, I didn't mind it. I met the wife of his academic advisor, Mary. She was around 50 and worked in the university administration. A wonderful woman. We often had lunch together when I visited. In fact, I connected with people from his program even more easily than he did. But about 2 years into the relationship, something strange happened. One day we were lying in bed at his place, partially undressed, and he suddenly said that he was bothered by the fact that I had gained weight, and that it was becoming harder for him to feel attracted to me. Not a word about health, just that he found me less attractive. I sat up and calmly replied, "Maybe you should make sure I have proper food when I visit you, instead of just crackers and cheese." I had gained maybe 4 kilograms since we met. I wore the same clothing size, and even at 23, I wasn't going to tolerate that kind of nonsense. I didn't argue. It was his problem, not mine. So I just asked, "So what's your solution?" He looked me blankly and said, "I think you should try to lose weight." I replied, "No, I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do?" He said, "Probably nothing. I just wanted to tell you how I feel." "Great, thanks." I got dressed, went to sleep, and left the next day like usual. We kept dating. But about 3 months later, he called and said he wanted to break up after nearly 3 years together. The reason? And I quote, "You're not scientific enough." I thought, what kind of nonsense is that? He seriously claimed that he couldn't talk to me about his work without using scientific animal terminology. I said, "That's ridiculous. What's the real reason?" But he insisted that was the reason. A month later, he came to return my things, and I made him tell the truth. Eventually, he gave in. It turned out he had been seeing one of his students. Let's call her Mac. She was 19, he was 26, and he was her instructor. I exploded. I yelled at him to get out. My roommate even threatened to throw him off the 2nd floor if he didn't leave, and he left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I broke down, from rage to hysterical laughter. I had seen Mac before, and suddenly it all clicked. At a barbecue at his place once, she had spilled something on her pants. Jake asked if I could lend her a pair of sweatpants. I couldn't. I wore a size 44-46, and she was significantly bigger. And suddenly everything made sense. His comment about my weight was never about me. He just wanted me to break up with him, because he was a coward. He liked a completely different type of girl, but didn't have the courage to say it. But you know what really got to me? He said it at night, when I was 150 kilometers from home, after we had been intimate. Did he really think I would just snap, turn around, and drive home in the middle of the night?
After that, I messaged his roommates. I thanked them for everything and told them we had broken up. And they already knew. They said they had demanded he tell me the truth, otherwise they would have told me themselves. That's why he came up with that nonsense about me not being scientific enough. One of the roommates, George, was a very sweet and attractive guy. He offered to bring my things over and said, "Come over this weekend. We'll have some drinks, relax." The kind of thing Jake never wanted to spend money on. I agreed. I came over. Jake wasn't home. George let me in, and that's when things got interesting. I started taking photos of all his animals because I knew one important thing. He had an animal that was on the endangered species list, and you couldn't legally keep it without a permit. All he had to do was file paperwork and pay $25, but he always said, "I don't want the government in my business." I photographed everything, the conditions, the cages, and another animal that was completely illegal to keep in that state. It was right by the window, visible from the street. Then George and I went into town. We got back around midnight, and we made sure Jake and Max saw us. Me in a short dress, a little drunk, George almost carrying me. We were loud on purpose, laughing, joking, even pretending there was something going on between us so they could hear. I spent the night in George's room. He behaved like a gentleman, but a few times walked out into the hallway just in his boxers. Pure coincidence, of course. In the morning, as I was leaving, Jake said, "You don't have to act like a..." I slowly ate a donut in a wrinkled dress with messy hair. George kissed me on the top of my head. Max sat there not knowing where to look. I smiled and said, "Enjoy my leftovers," and left. At the time, I thought that was my revenge. But no, that was just the beginning. The next day, I developed the film. Yes, the good old days. And immediately called the Department of Natural Resources. I reported everything, the animals, the conditions, the overcrowding, and especially the two that were illegal to keep in that state. I simply asked how to properly file a report, and then I did.
I destroyed my ex-boyfriend's life more than 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. As it turned out, Jake wasn't liked, not by his classmates, not even by his own roommates. But me? People liked me. George and another roommate decided to take things further. They filed a complaint with the university about a teaching assistant who was sleeping with his student and giving her preferential treatment. That same night we went bar hopping. They told the story to everyone they knew. The program was small, and the news spread fast. I made another move, too. I called Mary, his advisor's wife, and I told her directly. He admitted himself that he's sleeping with a student. I even had his emails where he confirmed it. I sent them to her. Mary was furious. She immediately passed everything to her husband, Jake's advisor. And then it all started. A couple of weeks later, George calls me, emotional. "They're here, inspectors. They're taking the animals." Mac was at home, and trying to save the situation, she said, "All the animals belong to Jake." That automatically cleared the roommates of responsibility. The inspectors knew exactly where to look. They were tipped off about the back window, where the most problematic animal was, the one that was almost never legal to keep. Since George was on the lease, he had the right to let them in. All the animals were kept in shared spaces. The inspectors worked for several hours. Then they came back with a warrant. They took all the animals and searched Jake's room. The only thing they left were a few guppies in a tank. Now, the most painful part for him. Graduate students live off grants, and he had just received a federal grant around the time we broke up. I called them,
and simply asked, "How do I report that someone with a federal grant is under investigation for illegal animal possession?" The result? He lost the grant and had to pay back nearly $30,000. He will never be able to get federal funding again. He wasn't jailed. The animals were in decent condition, but he lost all his animals, paid about $15,000 in fines. 2 animals were transferred to a wildlife center. The university didn't stay out of it either. He lost his stipend, was fired from teaching, essentially had his academic career destroyed, and all because of one thing. He was sleeping with a student. He couldn't even wait 4 weeks until the end of the course when it would have been technically allowed. His arrogance destroyed him. A few months later, I wrote to his sisters, told them I missed them. They replied and told me he had lied to the family, said I broke up with him because of distance. I just forwarded him his own email where he said he had fallen in love with Mac. And that settled everything. I moved on, finished my studies, built a career. And you know what I do now? I help scientists and doctors explain complex things in simple terms. Ironic, right? And him? He married Mac, 2 kids, went back to breeding animals. 20 years passed, and one day I'm giving a lecture at a university, 250 people in the room. And suddenly I hear, "Hey, long time no see." I turn around. It's him, Jake. I pretended I didn't recognize him. "Sorry, do I know you?" He said, "It's me, Jake." I paused and said, I guess my memory just erased you," and walked away. Later, I found out he was there for a job interview for a teaching position. They were seriously considering hiring him. And then I said just one sentence. "It's strange he's still teaching after what happened at University X." That was enough. They checked and found everything. The scandal with the student, the lost grant, the investigation, the old complaints. And you know what? He didn't get the job. Karma. Sometimes it works perfectly. And my conclusion? If the person who's supposed to love you humiliates you because of your appearance, the problem isn't you. The problem is them.